Let's do it. It's go time.
Hey, how's it going out there, guys? Welcome to BALLBUSTERS, episode 70. Wow, man, that's a lot. We started a while back. Just hit me right now. As usual, if you'd like to support this channel, there are PayPal and Patreon links in the info box below. Got a great one lined up for you today. We're still dropped anchor, camped out on the scientific method. And this one's gonna be it's gonna be a barn burner. It's the heart of the scientific method. So see what we got on the panel out there. We got Nathan Oakley.
To be here as a guest, it seems.
You're not, yes, sir.
I know, but I wasn't here last time, was I?
No, that's okay. You know, stuff happens, man. It's just the way it is. I get it.
Good to be here anyway.
Mitchell from Australia, sir.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Good to be here. Excited for this show.
How's it going down under, man?
It's going great. We've had great spring weather at the moment. Getting out and enjoying what the Flat Earth School has to offer us every single day.
We have Arwen. Hey, Arwen, what's going on, man?
Yo. Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm kind of trying to take it easy because I had 10 hours of streaming yesterday. So
Really?
I need a break sometimes too.
You stream for 10 hours?
Nathan got a week, damn it.
I didn't notice I was busy yesterday, man. I wanted to cut it anyway, so you stream for 10 straight hours?
No, not like that, but just over the day. 10
Oh.
hours combined, pretty much.
No, that's a lot
I
of
was on
streaming.
Mitchell's yesterday, actually. It was a really awesome stream. 1.5 hours.
It
And
was.
Nate-
You're a great guest, mate.
Yeah, it was great to be there. And Nathan, had like a record long after show, so it was combined 4 hours. So, and then my own show, that starts ticking. Had a 3-hour Skype call after that on top of it all. But I'm okay.
Cool.
I had a good night rest.
Neil, how's it going, sir?
Going well, going well.
Oh, you sound great, man. You're not in your car.
Laying on my bed, relaxing.
I hear you. Welcome to the show. We have the Adam Meakin
Evening, everyone. How are you all?
back from glamping, correct?
Yeah, back from that. Recovered from the cold that I picked up. Well, virtually recovered, as you can hear from that row.
Oh, yeah, I heard.
The great living outdoors, yeah. But yeah, nice to be here, John. So I missed the last one, I think, as well, because I was away.
Yeah, we were talking about that. Stuff happens, man. You got that life, right?
Well, the wife's only 51.
Yeah, this like I'm starting to wax philosophical. I guess I have to. Word. So, I know Nathan's gonna love this. What you have for breakfast this morning? Nah, just kidding.
No.
Just kidding, Adam, man. Don't
no.
worry. Yeah. That'll send Nathan off the reservation.
I'm sorry for Mitch,
Why?
like star guest, and what he did was waffle on about food. And when I protested from the chat, Mitchell turned on me and just joined in and said that I'd asked for you to extend your discussion about food, which was a total lie.
That's usually that's just what I do to my children. If they whinge, I usually make it worse for them. So they tend not to whinge too much.
So people
I
don't.
hate broccoli. Have all the broccoli in the world, then.
Exactly.
I had broccoli last night, man. I hadn't had it in a while, and I said, I want some broccoli.
Broccoli is awesome.
Yeah, I know it is.
Discuss how much iron it's got and its health benefits, or should we talk about science? Perhaps?
Doesn't have all that much iron.
Just don't cook it too long.
It doesn't have that much iron to begin with. So, yeah, but I understand, Nathan. But everyone usually likes food, right? They have a passion for it, but I understand. I like talking about it. I guess we'll stick with that on QE Live. We'll get everyone hungry in the chat. Then they'll get pissed and then leave.
Broccoli's one of those foods, right? I don't mind on my plate. It tastes like crap, but I don't mind it on the plate because it does look cool, doesn't it? It looks like little trees.
Yeah.
Does not taste like crap.
It doesn't. It's got a
Cover it in
distinct...
butter, it does.
Or cheese.
Tastes like chewing little trees.
Chewy little trees. Here we go, Nathan.
You could see the little hamsters running around in my head. What's the way to deal with this? If I highlight it too much, they'll carry on. If I don't highlight it enough, they'll carry on. What do I do?
Yeah, there's a happy
Mention
medium.
all.
Right there.
Choose carefully.
All right, I'll get us off it. What's new in the flat Earth out there this week?
Hot dog, we're moving on.
Hot dogs.
No, I said no. I said, well, hot dog, we're moving on.
You know what I enjoyed this week was Mitchell's show last night with Arwen, because it was really nice just to, instead of Arwen hosting a show and reacting to other people, just to actually have Arwen kind of interviewed and get to listen to him a little bit, just about him. It was till they went on a bit at the end about the obvious, but actually the first bit of it for me I thought was really, really cool. I really enjoyed it, Arwen, and often we're even when we're talking, you know, we're discussing something and debating something. It was just nice to listen to your theology, mate. I enjoyed it.
I second that. So I gave a
Thank you.
heartfelt shout out to Arwin a couple of days ago while he was on the show, because we got to see a side of Arwin that typically you get to see on his own show, or better still, like you say, when he's interviewed by someone like Mitch. You just get to see normal Arwin, and that might sound like a weird thing to say. It's like, well, you've got Arwin on your show, that's normal Arwin. Well, no, it isn't. He's got a certain role that he's slipped into for whatever reason on my show. So I don't get to see that side of Arwin. So having him interviewed was a nice change, because I don't think there's been a great deal. I interviewed Arwin back in the day, but you know, it was nice to see that. So kudos to Mitch and Arwin. That was really nice to see. And you know, a proper shout out to Arwin's show, because you get to see that on his show. Obviously, it's his show. A shout out to the Early Bird. Shout out to the. It was on Flat Earth School, wasn't it? Interview.
Correct. Yeah, it is on my channel,
Shout out
Mitchell from Australia. But yeah, Owen is ace.
He's run off. Oh, he's back.
He got so embarrassed that he had to leave. Owen, you are ace.
Yeah, no, it's because the sound stops after a while. Thank you. I was kind of getting embarrassed though from all the compliments, but I appreciate it. It was good.
Arwin is also a dick, just for balance. I'm going to talk straight through him when I say that.
What's going on?
The other couple of shandies.
I'm trying to make you feel more comfy.
All right.
Just for balance. I was joking though.
No, but it was great, and I felt really good yesterday overall. That's why I decided on every step, just like keep going, because I had just a great energy going. It's been just amazing weather here today as well. And when that happens, I just get this extra boost. And I just try to take advantage of it as much as I could. And it worked out great. I'm really happy with the results. It was very enjoyable. So thanks, guys. I really appreciate all the support and all the shout outs and everything.
All good.
Subscribe to Owen. Everyone needs to subscribe to Owen.
Arwin. Mitchell from Australia and Arwin, both great channels. But we must eventually segue away from hot dogs, food, and plugging each other's channels, which is all well and good. You could slap each other on the back all day long, but there was a time, I say that with a sense of past tense for a good reason, and I hope QE will back me in this, when understanding the scientific method was the most important part of this discussion. And on heart, there was a time it was elevated above understanding that you can't have gas pressure without a container. The black swan didn't exist, and it wasn't the year of the sextant. And at that time, this was the most important thing to understand. And I don't know if QE will say that it's a foundation to an understanding that could destroy your current globe faith if you have one, or affirm your understanding that the Earth is obviously observably, measurably, and navigatably flat, because those things could all be done without necessarily having any understanding of the scientific method. But when it comes to this discussion, the arena and the deception, and having a good grasp of how you've been deceived in the first instance, why is it that I've got this? If you're a globe believer, I step into the shoes of one as I say this. Why is it that I've got a fundamental understanding that I am on a ball, and therefore every argument I start with will start with me being on a ball? Well, it's because of this. It's because of a misapprehension about what science is. These Ballbusters and Quantum Eraser live shows that go out that are about the scientific method, and people might say, why is it that you cover this so much? It's because while it might not be a foundation to destroy your globe faith or affirm that the Earth is flat, when you're in debate about the nature of reality, hoodwinkers that will come after us if we all got wiped out in a bomb now, immediately, going forward, people that would redesign the system would probably use the same exact magic tricks. They recycle the psychopathy that is involved in running the show, a metaphor. That type of person recycles all the time. And if it's a good trick, if it's a good magic spell, they'll use it over and over and over again. And this is the magic spell. Now, I launch into the show with this preamble because even on our own side, and I say that loosely, the flat earth side of the argument, there's plenty of people who have misapprehensions about how they've been deceived, and they'll blame science. and call it scientism and various other things. Don't get me wrong, there's people out there like Jaron as a good example who does understand it, but isn't necessarily perfect in his phraseology, but nobody is. But he definitely understands about hypothesis construction and experimentation when he's calling it scientism. But there are others who don't. And if you don't appreciate how you've been deceived, how you've been placed on a ball from birth, and how you were led to argue from that position being the truth without actually considering it in the first place. The reason was because of science, because a scientist probably told you Earth was a sphere. It was given to you from a position of authority, and that authority will have been masked in science. But understanding what science actually is, number one, expands your appreciation of what is and isn't validated in that arena. And I can tell you now, 99.9% of it isn't validated by actual scientific methodology. And that's critical to know, because a lot of the stuff that you're told has got that strapline or one of the magic words that go with it, i.e. experiment, hypothesis, theory, science. All of these words are thrown into the mix when they're talking colloquially about mystic meg theories to convince you that their just so story is actually valid, true, proven. Those are the things that science does offer. But it's useful to hijack if you're going to tell a story. Tell the story and just say science at the end, and everyone go, ooh, really? You go, yeah, really, science. Go, oh, wow, well, that means it's true then. That's the trick. If that's enough preamble to get QE all lined up with his presentations, and maybe we'll get a discussion off my preamble. You never know.
Now that was the trick. In fact, well, that's what really got me going on the flat Earth, because you realize, you understand, everyone does. The moment you step into this genre with the flat Earth, it's not going to take too much time until you hear, if you believe in flat Earth, then you must deny all of science and all of physics. It was the first day when I entered the community, right? And how many times have I heard that since? And it just struck me as hilarious. I said, you guys are going to go down with the ship. Even before, and let's move away from flat Earth, just to think about times before the flat Earth, even before evolution, even before I was out here, right? The Jedi mind trick it used to baffle me, because I would sit around with my peers and, now, I wouldn't say anything, right? I would just, sit back and feel my way through and not say anything. And they would even go along with it. If somebody would say, like if we'd see a commercial and it talks about scientific evidence, like you do, Nathan, you bring that up. It always reminds me of that when you bring it up. Like, this is scientifically validated. And I wouldn't say anything. I'd just be sitting there snickering to myself, but I'd be looking around to see if any would protest. Even those people with actual science degrees, they wouldn't protest. I never pushed the issue. I was just like, oh boy, why doesn't people speak up? What, do you lack the intestinal fortitude or honesty, or you're not paying attention? You're looking at the same thing and hearing the same thing I am. Why aren't you saying anything? Even some of my family members, I won't get, without mentioning any names, have science degrees. They'll not only listen to it, but they will parrot pseudoscience as science themselves. I don't understand. I don't get it, right? What is it? Cognitive dissonance? It's got to be, I'm not into diagnosing things, but you got to give me a break. Are you not paying attention? I know you have to be paying attention if you're repeating it, right? And then saying, well, that's science. So I don't know. It's got to be something in the human psyche. If they get Jedi mind tricked, I don't know. Maybe somebody else can explain it to me. I don't get it.
I could give a
just a short one. Be concise, please.
I will. I think it might have to do with sheer exposure, right? Advertisement for these ideas that are being brought out. that are based on delusions? Well, because of the exposure, because of the very easy chance to bump into any kind of advertisement or something that relates to it. Because of that, and yeah, because of sheer exposure, people have it stored in them. They've seen it so many times, they think it might be involved in what they're being confronted with. So they just parrot what they absorbed. And yeah, these types of typical pseudoscience reactions are very well advertised. So that's what people absorb. And that's why those responses come out first. That's my theory.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, well,
Go ahead, Adam, because Adam, hold on. Adam, you're one of the perfect examples of this. Remember what, back, you understand that. Well, I have this in my mind. You're not the person I'm talking about as my peers and stuff. That was other people. But
that's
go ahead.
That's why I'm huffing and puffing to start with, yeah? Because it is so relevant to me. I'll say it flippantly. Until you invented the scientific method, yeah, I had a vague idea what it was, and I'd used it. I'd probably kind of forgot what I'd been taught at school. There's a compliment in there somewhere. That's the first point in terms of, when you were saying about people not speaking up. Well, you know what? You did a bloody good job of not inventing it, yeah, not being flippant anymore, but reiterating the principles of what the scientific method is, which I think, myself included, as I attested, a lot of us scientists have forgotten.
Yep.
And we lost it. So that's the first bit. The other bit I wanted to say was in response to Nathan's bit, which is with regards to flat earthers, we must be science deniers. We're not, and that's why we're so threatening, if I'm being honest. But it's one of those things again that, and Nathan probably get this, but from a psychological point of view, what you do is attack your opponent at your weakest point, a bit like they do with Where's Your Edge, yeah? It's that thing. So your natural defense is, they attack you with we're science deniers. The reality is science is our friend. I love science, mate. It's on our side, and that's why they attack us so vehemently, yeah? And that's why your reiteration is so useful, because it points out that a lot of the stuff would have been swallowed by us as science, understanding the method properly, enables, and your reiteration equips us all to recognize their pseudoscience and take away a lot of the supposed support and evidence they have against us science deniers before we attack with science. And that's what we're seeing now. You know what I mean? That flat earthers coming back, understanding science, and that's why they run now. They've got nothing, have they, other than rhetoric.
Can I have a bash at answering the preponderance you proposed, Lieu?
1 second. We got a little audio feedback. Go ahead.
You said, I don't know why people like Adam in this example, although we have now made him the example, or he did. Sorry, Adam, that's just the way it's gone. you did it.
No, Nate, happy to be so, mate, yeah? Because I've got no quandary in discussing all the stuff that I used to think was science, stuff that I did in my degree, etc., etc. And I've done it before, and I'll do it again. I paid kudos to QE for that, for giving me, like I said, a kick in the ghoulies and waking me up and reminding me the actual reason we have faith in the scientific method, and reminding me why it's so rigorous, and seeing that lack of rigorousness in some of the things I'd accepted as adhering to the scientific method. And I'm happy to play Patsy here, because I was that man. Yeah?
Sure, I can make John D the example if you prefer.
Yeah, do him. Yeah.
Just kidding. I wasn't going to involve you that much anyway. But what I'm going to say is that I think, in terms of us learning what the scientific method is and how it proves things, we're learning it at a time in our lives when we're information sponges and will accept things carte blanche, true or false, because we're information sponges when we're told it. And then immediately after being told how the scientific method works and how it's empirical, you then move on, and have been previously, under the banner of science, learning about all sorts of other things. It doesn't matter if it's weather or mapping or whatever it is that you're learning it under the banner of science. Therefore, it's sort of dissolving the science method into, well, it's just anything that's happening in this room. And that includes, and then you have a whole massive list of things from that point forward that dilute science after you've literally just been told that it's empirical. So when you say, well, I just forgot and needed a kick in the ghoulies, well, I don't think that's you forgetting. I think it's immediately being dissolved and diluted in the way you've been trained through your early education. That would be my answer to your ponderance of, I don't know how it happens, QE.
Yeah, I would have to say that Adam, even though it was directed towards him at the end, because I have him in my mind because he stands out to me, and we gotten close over it, over the issue. I would have to say that Adam was so humble and gracious and thankful immediately when all I did was just nudge him a little bit, right? No one has done that in the past 6 years. But let's just go higher, 15 years. If I would tell somebody that has an actual science degree or science background that I have spoken up to, all have bowed their back against me. Not one single.
Comparison's not fair.
Say again?
Adam's the nicest guy on the plane. You can't really make that as a comparison. It's not fair. Other people.
He's the only one that's been gracious and thankful and realized it, because he can think critically, right?
I have to drop light all in there. You're getting me embarrassed. Stop it.
Am I lying, Adam?
No, you're not. Adam is amazing, but he doesn't like to be.
Okay, save Adam the
highlighted.
embarrassment. Sorry to do this. But what we're talking about is Adam's appreciation that science isn't somebody saying that, I don't know, a group testing or a control group or whatever vernacular you're going to throw in that isn't an adherence to the scientific method. It isn't systematic experimentation based on hypothesis. Anything outside of that is pseudoscience if claimed to be science. And when that was explained to Adam, he was extremely grateful to have appreciated that after the fact, because every one of us watching who've had a normal education, which we all have as far as I'm concerned, in this example at least, we all appreciate what science is because we were all told. Adam's no different, but he's then gone through what I've described as being a dilutory process, diluting you away from scientific methods and towards correlation-based testing. Well, that process left Adam not realizing that there's a problem with how he's phrasing everything he claims when he says the word science before or after something that he's describing that hasn't gone through the method. Knowing that was something that made Adam feel better. I assume. I'm speaking for him now, but I shut up at this point.
You're right, and you also praise yourself professionally. There's nothing wrong with looking at it and saying, actually, this part of my discipline isn't science. I used to say every bit I did was science, which, let's say, dilutes its potency. And there's nothing wrong with describing your discipline in other ways, logic, correlation, as you apply it. You can't science everything. You certainly can't science the human body. Infinitum, there's bits you can science, and then there's bits of medicine. And I think it helped me develop professionally. I've been awake at this level for a while, and it helps you describe to students better, what's fact and what is correlation, and providing that distinction to me strengthens the core of science and helps certainly me as a clinician demonstrate the discipline I teach in a much better way, so my students understand what's more solid and what is their professional opinion, put simply. But it's helped me grow as well, like I say, outside of flat Earth, because it's a very important distinction.
Oh,
Right, but for the stress on the audience, Adam's dealing with chemistry, and there's plenty of things within chemistry, Adam's saying, is not within the realms of the scientific method and therefore shouldn't be expressed as science, but carte blanche, it would have all been described as it. Anything that's dealing with chemistry, right? Well, you as an audience member, just know this. The single thing that would distinguish it would be what actually sits inside the methodology. And there's only 3 real steps. I'm sure Kiwi's going to get into this in the presentation, so I don't want to steal too much thunder. But it's fairly simplistic in terms of what you can establish. Is this science worthy or is this not science worthy? The first thing to establish is there a phenomena occurring in nature to study? That is the first primary thing. What's happening here then is going to be the first question that's asked. So in case you're looking it up on Google, what's the scientific method, and it come across ask a question, no. Unless the question is what's occurring here and the thing that you're asking about is actually happening in nature, unless that's the question you're asking, it's outside of scientific inquiry. So concrete nouns, radius of Earth that's assumed, things like that. You know, I don't know, a horizon, things that are a concrete noun as opposed to a phenomena. Actually, could you describe the horizon as a phenomena? Probably not a good example. Either way, the first thing you've got to have is a phenomena. If you can wrap your head around that science is a study of the physical and natural world, that's what it is, then you've got good standing to appreciate what will and won't be science. So just with that single piece of information that you need a naturally occurring phenomena, from the chat, and I'm not even going to look because I'm going to hope you'll participate with me just doing it verbally. If I was to say the grip level of a Michelin tyre, based on me saying that you need a natural phenomena first, is that or is that not science? Oh, I groan and hope that everyone from the chat is going, no, that's not science, because it hasn't got a naturally occurring phenomena. So if nothing else from this particular Ballbusters, if you've watched all the others and you don't appreciate anything about it, and you've just sat in the chat the whole time, not really paying attention, pay attention to this one detail. It can only be scienced if it's a naturally occurring phenomena. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Kiwi to actually start the presentation properly.
yeah, you were all over it, right? As soon as you said that, right? I'm looking at the presentation, and there you go. There's 3 steps. And I'm looking right at him, and I said, yeah, he's got some good retention skills. Because that's what it is, right? It's 3 steps, and we're going to get into it. Very important steps. It's just this easy, folks. You see these? That's it. That's really all it is. There's no mystery here. There's no rabbit holes. There's nothing obscured or hidden. It's right there. And it's as simple as experiment, because experiment is the king of the scientific method, period. End of story. So if it's the king of the scientific method, you have to figure out what makes up an experiment to get you to experiment. And then you'll have the whole 9 yards, because the experiment is birthed from the queen, the hypothesis. So that's one thing we need right there. So you remember this in school, hypothesis, which is birthed from the first step of the scientific method, observing natural phenomena. It just flows logically. The critical, indispensable steps are, so I hear a lot of people out there, after 5 years, they're like, the QE's 4-step scientific method. Well, what 4-step scientific method? I never gave any 4-step scientific method, not that I can remember, right? It's always been these 3 critical steps. I've been teaching on this for 5 years. It hasn't changed. So people just add steps. I don't know what they're thinking. But it's pretty funny. Maybe you ought to consider paying attention to the detail, ballers. Just a thought. 3. You see this? Burn this into your retinas. The critical, indispensable steps are observe a natural phenomena, formulation of a hypothesis, and experiment. It's as simple as that. Without these, without this guy, you don't have science. And you can't have that guy without that guy and that guy. Simple. 66% of the experiment is hypothesis. 50% of the hypothesis is natural phenomena observed. Just as easy as that. Let's get back to the University of Rochester Physics Labs to stress this point. The scientific method distinguishes science from other forms of explanation because of its requirement. This is a very key word right here, because it's required. You must have systematic experimentation. That's saying that if you don't have that, you don't have that. And by the way, what he's trying to tell you here is he's saying science. Now, he's not, just appealing to knowledge. He's a physicist. He's appealing to natural science. He just isn't saying it. When quote unquote scientists say science, they mean natural science. That's what they're talking about. Don't let that confuse you. This isn't computer science. This isn't science isn't gathering knowledge. Not that science. We're not going to equivocate here. We're dealing with natural science and the scientific method. So remember, without this, you don't have that baby. It's just as simple as that. Why? Well, because it's required. Well, all right. What is an experiment? Or what is the importance of an experiment? We'll get to what is an experiment down here further. But why is it? Remember I said, and I don't even have to say it anymore, their own pseudoscientists and scientists are telling them that the experiment is crucial. It's key. It's required, like we went over above. We'll just harp on that for a couple minutes. So, from Lieu's Introduction to the Theory and Application of Molecular and Quantum Mechanics, the final arbiter of truth in science is experiment. Well, I don't know if he could be any more clear, right? I don't know if there's any wiggle room in there. Let's see if we can find any more wiggle room down here. From Professor Shankar, Chair, Physics at Yale. The only way things change in physics is experiments. Everything is based on experiment. That's the only way we change our mind. Any wiggle, I'm not feeling wiggle room here. If everything is based on experiment, then in physics, and physics is the queen of the sciences, everything else falls underneath physics. If you haven't heard that before, just let me tell you. All the actual natural sciences fall under physics. Period. So all of natural science, everything is based on experiment. From Richard Feynman, if it doesn't agree with experiment, it's wrong. And that simple statement is the key to science. And what is he talking about? Well, he's talking about natural science. It is the key to natural science. Well, if you don't have the key, you're not getting into natural science. This is the key. This and this alone. From Max Planck, experiment is the only means of knowledge at our disposal. Everything else is poetry, imagination. Why is he saying that? Well, Max Planck is a physicist. In his context, he's talking physics. Experiment is the only means of knowledge at our disposal. Now, can we know things without experiment? Yes. But within natural science, you must have this. Pretty simple. Let's see if there's any more wiggle room down here. Back to the University of Rochester Physics Labs. They're gonna go a little bit more in depth from their general statement above of requirement, but they're also going to mention here again. So, the scientific method requires that a hypothesis be ruled out or modified if its predictions are clearly and repeatedly incompatible with experimental tests. Further, no matter how elegant a theory is, its predictions must agree with experimental results if we are to believe that it is a valid description of nature. In physics, as in every experimental science, that's redundant, Experiment is supreme, and experimental verification of hypothetical predictions is absolutely necessary. Now, I don't. What are you going to do here? What are you going to say? That science doesn't require experiment? Really? In the face of that? That's a real belly laugher. I've witnessed hundreds of people do it, mainly ballers, right? After I'd whip these out, they'd say, well, you don't need experiment for science. Where does it say that in there? Right? What, are you kidding me? You shouldn't be in this discussion. If that's your stance after what I just said to you, right? You've got deeper rooted issues, more deep than whether the earth is flat or sphere or not. Because you got textual pareidolia or you're illiterate. Now, what is an experiment? From Penn State University, there should be 3 categories of variables in every experiment. Dependent, independent, control. Wonder if they're just like the Lone Ranger out there and they're just making this stuff up. Let's take a look. So we'll go to explorable.com. They're a research organization. There are 3 important variables you have to remember when you're designing your experiment. Well, Penn State has 3. Are they the same 3? Looks like it. Independent, dependent, control. Looks like a conspiracy between Penn State and explorable.com. See what else we can find. See if there's any other echoes we can find out there. From the Institute of Physics. Well, heck, they should know, right? Let's see. When planning an investigation, students need to identify the variables that they consider significant and then to select the ones they want to look at for cause and effect. Oh, we breached something right here. We'll get back to that. If possible, any other variables that will affect the outcome of the experiment need to be kept constant during the investigation. Independent, dependent, control. I don't know. We're getting a little bit, we got 3. We're getting a little bit far away from, this is just happenstance, right? A lot of similar echoes. If we go to Wiki, let's just get the general outline. An experiment is a procedure carried out to support, refute, or validate a hypothesis. That's its mission. Experiments provide insight into what? Cause and effect. Boy, that shows up again. So now we got the 3 variables and then its mission. What is it answering? What is the experiment? What is the experiment going to answer for you? It only answers these questions. Cause and effect. You've already seen it twice, right? Provide insight into cause and effect by demonstrating what outcome occurs when a particular factor is being manipulated. Wonder what that is. Yeah. From McClellan Christen, Nature of Science and the Scientific Method Experiment. Once the hypothesis has been established, it is time to test it. The process of experimentation is what sets science apart from other disciplines. We heard that before, didn't we? So Kristen McClellan said that, right? Didn't the University of Rochester say that in the beginning? Oh, I'm thinking it did. Right here. The scientific method distinguishes science from other forms of explanation because of its requirement systematic experimentation. Yeah, that's what they said. Yeah, Kristen McClellan must have been talking to Professor Wolf's up here or something. Looks like a conspiracy because she just said the same thing. Right? The process of experimentation is what sets science apart from other disciplines, just rearranged a little bit. And it leads to discoveries every day. An experiment is designed to prove or disprove. Uh-oh, that's the first curtain call right here for this guy. But I digress. An experiment is designed to prove or disprove the hypothesis. If your prediction is correct, you will not be able to reject the hypothesis. We're going to show you that down here beneath, here in a little bit. So it seems like experiment is key, if I were to summarize this little section. Experiment is key to the scientific method. That is, you can't have science, natural science, without experiment. experiment is made up of certain types of variables. What are they? Independent, dependent, and control variables. What's its mission? Experiment. Well, it is to elucidate natural cause and effect relationships. Those 3 points summarize the experiment and how important it is. So I'm going to stop here. I'm sure some people are itching back there. So let's stop. Questions, comments?
I've got a couple of issues with I think it was the second quote.
Okay.
And there's a little bit of redundancy.
Where at?
Say again?
Which one?
You might figure it out just from what I'm about to say about it. I can't tell you which one it was. I'm sorry. I should have made a note. But he says that if an experiment is repeatedly incompatible with the theory, then it must be rejected. Well, I could take a couple of issues with that.
Yeah, I do too. Hey, hold on. Before you went there, I identified the problem area before you got there. Go ahead.
Did you?
Yeah, I knew you were going, so I scrolled right down to the part before you said it.
Oh, okay. Well, number one, I can understand. I'll just fight for his corner first, or her corner, whoever it is that's saying this.
Professor Wolf.
Just to say that. Again?
Professor Wolf's his corner.
Professor Wolf's corner. You could say, okay, you've done an experiment, you've then got to your theory, and then further to that, you do another experiment, and part of your explanation that was based on the original experiment is invalid by the new experiment. Therefore, that statement does make sense in that context only. However, the redundancy that I described comes in because he's saying that if something is found to be incompatible after experimentation, well, within the experiment, you've got a null. That's the point of doing the experiment. One or other of those two predictions will be invalidated. To say, well, if it's found to be repeatedly incompatible, it's like, well, that you could also rephrase that as you repeatedly validate the null. Is that what he means? It's just a bit redundant because that's in essence what you've got when you actualize a hypothesis, because it'll have a null. And number two, that only makes sense if you're taking the theory to have been validated first by an experiment, and part of your description in the theory becomes invalidated by a secondary experiment. Therefore, contextually, it's a bit of a mess, and it's got a bit of redundancy in it that isn't needed. That's my only objection.
Nope, you're correct.
Could I give special pleading on that?
There's some problems in here. Hold on one second, Adam. I already pointed out another one, right? In physics, I stressed it, right? In physics, as in every experimental science, experiment is supreme, but in every experimental science, that's redundant. Another redundancy. I knew right where you were going to go. And I agree. Professor Wolf's, his page right here on the scientific method is outstanding, and it has some errors. So what you got to do is you got to chew on the meat and spit out the bones. Okay? I tried to contact him to talk about the errors, but he decided he didn't want to talk to me because I was a flat earther. So, sorry about that, Adam. Floor is yours.
Yeah, well, just before Adam goes, I'll just say nobody's perfect. And, I'm being hypercritical because that's the whole point of this show. We're talking very specifically about science and the scientific method. So we're going to not leave any soda and turd. But by the same token, mucho respect to the guy. The fact that it's written down for us to even reference in the first place. These things aren't easy to track down. And just one more thing, Adam, I'm really sorry. The reason, and this is only because QE's told me this is the reason, is because it's rudimentary. In other words, to you person who's at this stage, to say scientific method is based on experimentation is based on hypothesis, and a hypothesis is based on independent variable, dependent variable, control variables, is so rudimentary that you're unlikely to actually find it stated. I said earlier on in the show as the preamble that we were taught it in, 5th grade?
Yep.
So therefore, to start stating it at this level isn't actually an easy thing to track down to cite. So thank you very much, Professor Wolf. Really appreciate it.
Go ahead, Adam.
Okay. It's kind of like a special pleading because I think it can be taken out of context. This, to me, I think this is quite. Oh, put it back, John. It'll help me. I mean, you can take this statement one of two ways, like you're taking there, but you can also look at it and realize it's realizing that when we approach stuff, sometimes you do crazy stuff. You've got a really good hypothesis. Let's take the Cavendish idea. Okay, so you've got a very beautiful hypothesis, surrounded in a lovely theory, and you take it to experiment. And to me, what this is saying is, look, you can wrap this stuff up however you want with beautiful theories and hypotheses that make sense. If it goes to experiment, and experiment says, bunk 'em, then it doesn't matter how pretty these things are. The scientific method is reminding you, we want to be abductive. If the ball did exist, then the Cavendish could be a lovely piece of genius. But what it is a piece of poetry, as the scientific method with failed experiment goes to demonstrate. It's just poetry, and I don't have a problem with it, because to me it's reaffirming the method, but it's kind of not discouraging you from trying stuff abductively. But if it does disagree, stop wasting your bloody time, is what it says to me.
Adam, I started to eat my banana, man.
Any more for anybody
seriously?
else? Other than Adam, did Arwin or Mitchell have anything meant at this stage of the presentation?
Yeah, I just want to signify how important the hypothesis is, because if you don't have a valid hypothesis, you cannot even get to the experiment stage. So like Adam just said, you may have a beautiful hypothesis for the Cavendish quote unquote experiment, but you don't even have a valid hypothesis to get to the experiment. You don't have a naturally occurring phenomenon in the Cavendish. You can't even call it an experiment. You don't even get to the experiment stage because you do not have a valid hypothesis. You cannot build that hypothesis in the first instance. That's why presentations like this are so important, because it's not only do we get told as flat earthers that we are science deniers, the globe believers say that they have science on their side. And having a claim of science, that means you need to be following this scientific method, the scientific method. If they claim that they have science backing the rotation of the Earth, you can take them through this. You say, okay, first we need if you're claiming science, please show me the naturally occurring phenomenon. And they don't even get past that first step. That's why just putting everything that the globe claims as science through the scientific method, it is absolutely devastating for the globe.
It's a very good point. The term experiment has an alternative title, which is hypothesis actualization. So while I think QE's presentation had experiment as the king or queen of method, well, hypothesis actualization, that's what experiment is. And Mitchell's point being that, well, you've got to have a valid hypothesis and you've got to have a valid phenomena to be studying in the first place. To get there, that would be the experiment stage. You're not going to get there without those things. And they're all integral. It's not like, you can just remove one of these three steps that was described in the opening part of QE's presentation and go, I'll be all right. Just do without the hypothesis stage. That is precisely what's being done in the magic trick that's deceived you into believing you're on a spinning ball flying through a sky vacuum. Because they've asserted science, and then if you actually look into what they've done, they haven't got one of these integral steps. And as it's just been highlighted by Mitchell, without a hypothesis, which would be IV, DV, CV, without those things, you're not going to get to the stage where you're going to actually validate anything. So you need a hypothesis, you need a phenomena to get to the king of the method, which is experiment. Are you there? Did you have anything to add? Well, Adam?
Yeah, I was going to say the IVDV, and forget the controls. Cavendish again is a great example where you can set up an experiment and have to realise that you aren't within your experiment even expressing your proclaimed IVs, and Yeah, it's a good example of a crap show. Frank, you know what I mean, Cavendish. How it exemplifies very well how none of these criteria are met within it. Too good sometimes. But within it, you can see if you don't use the experiment and the experiment in, and there can be fault in the experiment, but as well that you can have a good hypothesis, but your experiment is not replicating that in any way. Cavendish is another good example. Or being able to test it in any way. So it's that match between the two that's part of the genius as well. Sometimes I think if you can get, how do you demonstrate your hypothesis and make sure the experiment actually isolates the IV independent and dependent variables, yeah? That's part of the genius of the scientist, to me sometimes, how you actually can get to an experiment that is valid.
Yeah, that is the genius of science. So while it's perfectly acceptable to call yourself a scientist, if you are actualizing a hypothesis, that would be to say manipulating an independent variable in an apparatus to see if it causes your dependent variable that you're studying, to try and ascertain the cause of it. Now, if you're actually doing that, if you're the one literally at the helm, physically manipulating your independent variable by whatever means, then you're a scientist. However, as Adam's pointing out, the genius is the person that scribbled down, if this, then I think that. And that is the natural phenomena that you want to know the cause of. So the person that actually says, I think it'll be this. And for me, that, although I totally agree with Adam, the beauty of the hypothesis isn't in that aspect of it. It's actually in the null. That's where I see the beauty in the hypothesis. Because the null is the part of the hypothesis that offers no wiggle room at the end of the process. One or other of those two things, the null or the alternative, will be validated at the end of systematic experimentation. I say systematic because, you know, people, as I said earlier, nobody's perfect. People can cock up. You can mess up the apparatus, and you can do it wrong. Hence, you've got to do it over and over and over and over and over and over again, and show systematically that you're getting the same result every time. This does cause that. And at the end of that process, yeah, you've either validated what you thought was going to cause the effect, in which case you're a genius, or more often than not, you validate the null. If this, not that. And that's still a win. You have validated your null. You've gone through the process, and what you've said is, it isn't that. That can be put on one side, controlled, and never dealt with ever again, because you have validated the null hypothesis. So the reason I say it's beautiful is because it's empirical.
Grat has a question.
You're at the helm now if you're not got a mouthful of chicken.
What's that? Sorry. Okay. I think it was in like your third quote. The person said something about the description of nature, science. I can't remember where it was. It said the description of nature, and I thought science only explains.
That's right.
It's not for describing.
That's right. Let me go find. You said it was in the third citation.
I think it was.
The third one on experiment?
I think so. You read so many, I can't remember now.
Yeah, I know.
I know that he says it's something, it's for the description of nature. And that just stood out for me because I always thought science is to explain nature, not describe it.
It's a very, very good point.
Oh, okay.
No, you're right on point. It's very good. They probably did say it in here, and I usually don't brush past those. I usually catch it, but I'm looking here.
While Kiwi's looking that up, that brings such a big smile to my face, Strat. The fact that you're not a ballbuster, you're a guy on the panel, you've joined, and you've just gone, you know, I've also got a critique in terms of this uber-specific presentation in regards to hypothesis construction and experimentation. You're like, shouldn't this be explains? As describes is kind of like, isn't that a bit more like laws? Just descriptions, doesn't explain what caused it. So the whole purpose of science is to explain what caused it, not describe what's happening. So good catch.
Yeah,
and it was a big smile on my face.
It is a good catch, and he's exactly right. Guess which one I found it in?
Same one I was pulling apart, probably.
Yeah, it's up on screen. I put it up on screen about a minute ago.
See why you contacted this guy.
Like you said, but I didn't contact him. When I first called him, I wasn't like, oh, I'm really going to put this guy in his place. No, I was going to thank him, like you said. I said, you got a lot of good information in here, man. Thanks a lot, because like you said again, it's very difficult to find these things. So I was going to thank him. I was just going to take umbrage with about 25 other things that he wrote just to go over them. I wasn't, going to grill him or anything. But that's what we got.
That's such a lot of crap. The reason QE's stammering and stammering about what I say is because that is precisely what you were going to do. Right? We all know it.
It wasn't, but anytime, it just depends. Like Adam. If the person that you're talking with is receptive and he can think critically on his feet and doesn't let his emotional status take over his critical thought process, then I think it would have been good. Listen, I've dealt with these.
Exactly, you could have developed a friendship through it.
Sure, yes.
I had a similar scenario with John D. Right?
Yes.
Same thing. But at the end of that, I keep in reasonably close contact with John D now as a result of that. In other words, there's a friendship developed. I had to basically do the same thing. First and foremost, approach him and say, I really love your work, but I just take umbrage with your abuse of the word experiment when you're firing a laser or whatever you're doing. And at first, he wasn't exactly receptive. He's so far intellectually above me in terms of his stature and his credits. You can understand why, because he's probably got dicks like me saying, oh, I think you're wrong about this all the time. And you just go, yes, okay, whatever, because you can understand. But I was like, no, I'm going to stress this to you because it is important in this arena for all the reasons we're covering now. And, it didn't take very long, don't get me wrong, for him to be receptive and, like Adam, appreciative after the fact. And now he bangs that drum too. So, it's one of those things that it was especially difficult for me from my lowly stature as a regular normie not accredited in any way to approach a PhD and say, you're wrong about how you're using the terms of science. How dare I? But by the same token, I was going to stand my ground on it, and I did.
Yeah.
And in that respect, you get to the same position with Adam. You're going to be eventually appreciative of the fact that you can see past some of the deception that previously you might not have given any consideration to. Now, this isn't John or Adam, it's every single person here. We all went through the same education.
He's cut.
Did he cut?
Whilst he's cut, I was.
Whilst he's cut off.
Rumpus him anyway. Yeah, I was going to rumpus him anyway because, in terms of the John D point, he did, and me and John are good friends, and I've gone one way. John has gone back through all of his training, and he's taking everything apart. Nathan made a monster there. John, I think we both took it on board. But John's gone back through all of his, his degree and to the basics, the history of it, and he's applying this to everything, which is what you'll see in some of John D's work. He's savaging even some of the more fundamentals from history that people would assume were validated. So it is profound, and it intellectually it's very interesting. I think that's why John's done it, is to go back and apply this new critical eye to what you've applied. Because, we have a level of ignorance, arrogance, professionals. And I said, when you do wake up to it, it is as I described for myself and as I'm describing now for John, with what he's doing on some of his vids. You know, it's quite stimulating to do it to yourself. If oh dear, that sounds dodgy, doesn't it? But to appraise your own discipline, it's quite enlightening as well. And I'd say I'll shout it out again, Dr. John D's channel, because he's doing that. But the most recent
Interesting,
one was
you use him as being a monster. Your scientific background has led you to describe it in that way. You see him taking apart a bit of feedback. You see him taking apart what he's done in his past. I just see that as that would be the normal thing to do, wouldn't it? Just go back and John's a very straight talking guy, matter of fact. He's not, cold, but he's just matter of fact. Therefore, you go, okay, well, if I've considered that wrong and I'm saying it is correct, I'm going to go back and correct it. That, to me, seems like the logical steps to do it. Now, don't get me wrong, I can also see it for the reasons you've described him as being a monster, because you see him tearing through stuff that is very much just mainstream understanding. We'll just say it's science, right? He's just going through science and going, wrong, 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 wrong. It's just brilliant. But by the same token, that is actually the case. I mean, when I said earlier, a fact from QE, 99.9% of all of the studies that are out there that are claimed to be scientific studies haven't adhered to the scientific method. So it doesn't surprise me that he's going back and looking at stuff that he perhaps himself previously would have said as, this is the science of X, Y, and Z. And it isn't the science of X, Y, and Z. It's the study of X, Y, and Z. It doesn't make it any less valid in terms of its study quality and the results being useful in certain areas of technology, potentially, that all of those things are in existence already. So I think he was smart enough to realise this doesn't demean anything I've done. To reassess it in terms of the language being used, and therefore the claim to be empirical validity that's being claimed, that bit might be devastating to somebody who's claiming it, but that's their bad. If they've used and hijacked the words of science to claim validity where it wasn't necessarily even needed, much of what he does in spectroscopy isn't needed. You don't need to prop it up by saying it's science. These are uber sophisticated studies that they're doing. They're making leaps and advancements in our understanding. Doesn't mean that you decry it because somebody somewhere accidentally called it science when it wasn't. It doesn't decry any of the work either. Now, we do that when somebody takes something like spectroscopy and applies it to the stellar realm with none of the controls that are in place in those studies. It's not just removed from science and being used and hijacked as science. It's also complete bullshit in terms of the application of the method that was used originally in a study that's perfectly valid. That would be spectroscopy. So from me looking in on the outside when it comes to John, I just say nothing that you're doing's stomping on your own ground. You're not cutting your own tail off for the sake of it. You're not invalidating any of the work you've done previously. And I don't see that anybody, even in his close arena, could be annoyed about what he's doing. He's crossing the I's and dotting the... the other way around. He's crossing the T's and dotting the I's. And why wouldn't you if you're professional? That's good.
I think it's even better than that. I think if you just look at his more recent garage stuff, there's another fellow academic engaged with him. And I don't think his friend holds a flat earth opinion, but the points he's raising, his friend sounds intellectually honest and eager to just engage with this and I won't go into the detail, but engage with him equally. They're just looking at it with open eyes. So I think John's a
new title, Adam. I mean, that takes away the hijacking of the mysticism of the empirical nature of science. And when you just say he's just looking at it, and he's got an intellectually honest person who's not involved in the debate of nature of reality, just looking at what he's looking at and just looking at it critically and giving his opinion, presumably. Well, when you say just looking at it, that could have been and has been in the past labelled science. So just looking at things, studying the world around you when you're not performing experiments based on hypothesis, potentially needs a more grand title just so people pay attention to it. So you say, look, we're studying the nature of the world. How can you give that a title? If everyone's so used to, oi, audience member, you need to pay attention to this because I'm washing my hair and now comes the science bit. And you need that kind of strapline to offer some grandiose position to just a piece of information that's being studied without utilizing that word. That would be science.
I haven't got a strap line, but what I would say is, we talked about abductive reasoning and genius. Now, it doesn't just, or very rarely, doesn't come like a lightning bolt from the heavens. It's often through years and years of tedious crap, doing stuff, testing stuff, varying, changing. See, you know what I mean? That these things come from, and that's what it is. It's called, I suppose it's called preliminary research. You get what I mean? But that doesn't necessarily yield anything. But that's what's often required to have.
If we want to sell it, you've got to give it a bit of jazz, right? Preliminary research, yawn. Sexy, super exciting preliminary research. Yes, sir.
But that's the lie, isn't it? It's boring. It's crap. It's hours in a lab doing repetitive things. That's the reality. It's when you're doing those that the genius kicks in suddenly at some point. Something does resonate, doesn't it? Because you've taken in all of that detail, maybe subconsciously. And that's why, because you put, so with everything in life, because you put the hours in.
I'd like to shout out Whiskey Shaman for the super chat. He says, alleged experiments purporting to show Earth's rotation claim the rotation is both the DV, observed phenomena, and the IV, cause. Talk about a do-si-do. Thanks a lot, Whiskey Shaman. You're exactly right. They'll do it right in front of you. Right? You had a numpty clip just the other day, right? With the Clown Show Kosho do that same exact thing. Well, he changed the IV 2 times, right? Almost within 5 seconds of each other. Yeah, neither one was a valid IV, by the way, which is hilarious. But that's what they'll do. They'll talk real fast, right? This is a very good point. I wanted to bring this up before we get the scientific hypothesis. And I see a lot of people not doing it. Now, not anyone on this panel, because they've gotten wise and they've listened to me or waited for the trigger word. If somebody says something's natural science, what is the first thing I say before natural phenomena observed? I'll eventually get to that. That usually Nathan brings that up. But I'll say, what's the hypothesis? That's all you got to do. A lot of people out there aren't doing it. I've noticed this over the past couple of weeks, flat earthers, because I've heard ballers go, well, it's science. Well, and I'm waiting in anticipation. Like, go ahead, do it. Just say, what's the hypothesis? And then the whole thing will come crashing down. Nope, they don't do it. They just go with it, right? And it's, I'll tell you what, it's frustrating for me. I have to be honest.
There's a certain bunch of people that got trained whilst watching Flat Earth debate because you were there regularly with your pink writing, your template that had IV, DV, and null.
Yep. I miss those days.
Spurs chemo.
What?
Spurs chemo is a perfect prime example of that. Correct. So Spurs chemo's watched those shows and seen you bring up the template, and it's burnt into his retinas, and now he goes out and can just rattle it off casually. Like, gotta say, I'm impressed when he does it because he drops it in subtly. He does. He does a bit of me in other words. He plays dumb.
He does
intentionally.
Now, yeah, obviously Spurs is not what I'm talking about, because as soon as somebody says science, Spurs is all over it. What's the hypothesis then? I just sit back and smile, because then here we go. Here comes the brouhaha, because they don't have one. Number one, they don't know what one is. Even if they did, they couldn't construct one because it's illogical. It makes no sense. So I just smile at Spurs, right? He wasn't the one I was talking about, by the way, obviously.
Well, let's break this down. Let's just break this down a second. Like, what Kiwi's saying to you and talking to the audience is, the first question that should be asked if you hear the word of science being proclaimed is, what's your hypothesis? It's Mitchell's points as well. So Mitchell said, well, this is the critical detail. Why? Well, because when you say hypothesis, it's basically got every aspect of science wrapped into one of those points. So step one, observing a phenomena, you can't wrap that into a question that's so all-encompassing. Because what is the hypothesis? Well, it's the prediction of the cause of the effect that you're studying with the controls and the null. It's basically everything you need for science. So asking that question puts them onto the back foot, because they won't have it if they're certain anything in this arena, and I mean this sincerely. There is no science at all for heliocentrism. You name any aspect of it, you will not have any science for it. There's a reason why it's part of the housekeeping daily. Any single viable hypothesis from any of the fields of astronomy, cosmology, or astrophysics was carefully phrased by Quantum Eraser quite some time ago, and was, and still is, the last question to have been added to housekeeping. For this reason, ask them for a hypothesis. If you hear science, oh, my tires are scientifically validated to, right, all right, what's your hypothesis? Yeah, you watch that claim crumble completely. He's right. So pay attention. This is science training. If we had that template up on screen now, you'd see exactly what it ran in terms of the order. And I can even hear echoing in my ears. Just give us the independent variable. You've got half the hypothesis then.
I missed those days. Weren't they cool?
Everyone ran. Everyone's terrified of us now. So much so that one guy came in claiming to be a professor just so we knew where he stood when he made his claim of sticks and shadows.
Too funny, man. I
miss them days. We could have them days back if you just got up, basically.
Yeah, no, because
the fundies. We haven't got the fundies for it.
yeah, they usually, there's been too many. I mean, how long did we go on with that? About 8 months or so? They'd come in and boom, science. All right, wait a second. Here, and wrote it down, right? Like you said, in the big pink. I wanted to burn it in everyone's retina. And another reason, I wanted to write it down for everyone to see it, number one. Number two, I didn't want them to be able to change in midstream, because that's what they do. They'll give you one hypothesis, and then you'll say, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense. Oh, I didn't say that. I meant this, right? So that's another thing that got them. And it was like whack-a-mole. It was on a daily basis. They got wise to that, though.
That was why I was jumping in, actually, while I was talking about your template. So you mentioned Kosho changing his independent variable to his dependent variable, then back again within about 5 seconds. Well, that would be my understanding of why you had it up on screen, and the reason was because I didn't. And you were like, just put a template up like I have. Like, nah, that's too much work. I like to just remember these things so I can do them on the spot. I'll just let you into a little secret. The reason for that is if I imagine like presidential election debate, what have they got in front of them when they do that? A mic, right? So they can't put a template up in that position. So imagine, okay, if I was suddenly pushed into a position where I'm in worst case scenario, I've got cameras on me and a mic. I've got to be able to argue my position without being able to pull out a citation unless I've got it memorized, and can put quotes around it there and then. So I try and focus on being able to do that. Hence, I don't get citations. I just don't get them. That's the reason why, if I'm ruthlessly honest, try and give myself worst case scenario. I digress. My point here was going to be, when you have that template up, it's because they'll say, you'll ask them, what is your independent variable? That will be asking them, what do you think in this experiment you're claiming is going to be the cause that was varied to cause the effect that you're studying? What's your independent variable? Now, in this scenario, I can picture it now. Osho will have said, Earth turn. So the cause of this effect you're describing is going to be the Earth turning. That's correct. Okay. At that moment, you then write down on with the pink writing, cause, IV, right?
Yeah.
Earth rotation. Then 2 minutes later, when they say, well, no, the movement is going to be what we're looking at, but the actual effect is the Earth rotation. That's what's the effect. It's that's as a consequence. So it's the effect now. It's the dependent variable. Now, if you haven't got it written down on screen with the entire 100 people on chat going by looking at it being written down, that will slip by most people. They won't notice that what was previously the cause has now become the effect. So if you've got it written down, you can say, no. 30 seconds ago, you claimed the IV was Earth rotation. Now you're claiming it's the DV. Which one is it? And they won't be able to say, well, I didn't say it was the IV. You're just making that up. You misheard me. Didn't you understand my explanation? And ad hom.
I like to go back to what you were saying. What the first question should be is, what's your hypothesis? I always thought that the first question should be, what's the observed phenomenon? Because without that, there is no science. You have to have an observed phenomenon, and plus that is also. Hold on.
Let's just cover that.
It's also.
You say first question should be, what's your observed phenomena? Well, no. Okay, my observed phenomena is that black hole. They saw it and photographed. Easy. They've got phenomena coming out of their ass. They've got loads of them.
Well, then the second question, well, and plus the other reason is because that is the first step of the scientific method is observe a natural phenomenon, and then when they give you that, then say, okay, then what's your hypothesis then?
That's what happened.
That's just
the reason what's your hypothesis should be the first question is because you're asking them that anyway. When you ask for a hypothesis, you're effectively asking, what's your independent variable? That's what you're saying you should ask first. Well, you are actually asking that when you say, what's your hypothesis? And what's your dependent variable? What's the phenomena you're studying? And what are your controls if you wanted to expand it out? Although technically we don't tend to cover that. It's not needed. Everything else is a control. So we say, what's your IV-DV relationship? And that's being asked for in question, what's your hypothesis? That's the reason why it would be the first question. It includes everything.
You both are right. Okay, and I've got the template up there. While you were talking, I went searching for it. Right, so there's the pink. It's ready to go. Right, right there. I knew I'd scare it up somewhere. You both are right. It just in the scenario that we had on the show is okay. Well, I didn't go right to the hypothesis. I went to the first one, natural phenomena observed. Now, in discussion, without this being up, I'd go right to the hypothesis. Like Nathan said, as soon as I do that, they immediately have to invoke the dependent variable and independent variable relationship. So the dependent variable right here is immediately invoked. You follow?
Yeah, you're right, Strat. It is fundamental to the process because it's the first step. If you haven't got something to study the cause of, what the hell are you doing? That's science. You're trying to figure out the cause of a natural phenomena. So what's your IV relationship going to be? You need an independent variable after you've got a dependent variable, so you should be asking for that first. So I do see your logic. But by the same token, it is going to be asked for in effect when you ask for a hypothesis anyway. So asking for a hypothesis.
Well, it was just it's the way I usually do it because when I ask them, I go through the order of the scientific method. And because the first step is the observed phenomenon, second step is formulate a hypothesis, and then the third one, like to said, and do the experiment. So I try to stay in order with the actual method, and that's I guess that's why I
yeah no that's fine.
Do it that way.
You're fine that way, but just like I said, when we're in it, and I have the template up. When we're in this scenario, everyone's watching. That's the first question I'm going to ask. However, if I don't have this up and we're just in a discussion, I just want to kill it quick. So I'll say, so what's the hypothesis?
Makes sense.
And I agree with you also, Strat, in terms of the way I do it. That's what I think Huey even said earlier. That's what Nathan would do first.
Yeah.
And he's right. I would do that also. Because in my mind, I'm doing the same as you. I'm picking down the first step of the process, then the second step of the process, then the experiment. Normally, because that's what they've started with. I mean, the classic example in this scenario is actually gravity in terms of switching around IV-DV relationships. You'll ask them what the cause is, and in one, you've got Newtonian causes things to go down, go boom, boom. That's gravity as a cause, and the effect is things falling to the ground. Whereas in Einsteinian bending pseudo force space, you've got the cause as uneven distribution of mass, and the effect being what's described as gravity, which is the bending of space-time. So you've got two different scenarios when it comes to describing it or bastardizing the hypothesis description when you come to gravity. So they'll normally slip it in as a cause and then later change it to an effect. So if you don't tie them down in that regard to which one are you actually going to be using, or in this case, which one's the cause and what are you studying as the effect, they'll just flip it around ad hoc whenever the situation favors them, or if they're in a tricky situation, they'll just switch it around, and that effectively means they've gone from Newtonian to Einsteinian because it's suitable to the argument. So tying them down, writing it down, what are they actually claiming straight away stops them from doing that. But yeah, I just to back you straight, I do the same. Start with what's actually being studied. The whole point of this is that you've looked at something occurring in nature and go, oh, I wonder what causes that. That sentence is the essence of science. Somebody looking at something happening in nature and going, I wonder what caused it. And that's your that's your dependent variable, the effect. What are you studying? So your first question, perfectly legit. That's what I'd do too.
Yep. Did you guys like that? Were you reminiscing with the? I knew I had that template somewhere. It took me a while to find it. I was like, where is that thing? Yeah, I still got it. And the pink. Those were the days, man.
It just reminded me of something else, actually. There's now, I think it was you there, actually, QE. So there was a guy that was in the chat. It was claimed to be a long-standing Discord voice chat participant. I don't think I'd ever heard him until then, so it was a surprise to me. But apparently he's always been in my voice chat or yours. In other words, he's listening. He's not in the YouTube chat. If he's in our voice chat, he's actually listening. Certain trigger words you'd hear from any of us on the Flat Earth side when that was going on, if you were a baller and you were paying attention at the time, it would send shivers down your spine after you'd said it. So you'd be talking about Cavendish and you go, yeah, well, obviously there's the Cavendish experiment and you can show that gravity's real. And then you'd hear from me or QE or Neil or whoever's on the panel, experiment in this upward inflection, right? It happened the other day, but it wasn't scientific related. It was just a similar thing. It was a trigger word that somebody who's paying attention, like this guy I'm describing, has heard and gone, I'm out of here, right? So he's gone, well, I want to know how you'll explain the atmospheric dome, how you've got atmosphere in a dome that you claim. I was like, well, I don't claim a dome, but atmosphere? And the guy was like, I'm out of here. Bye. Trigger words. So you hear the word experiment, or you hear the word hypothesis, or you hear the word theory, or you hear the word science on the show, or on Ballbusters, or on QE Live when he opens it up. That would send shivers down my spine if I was a baller. Because it's the kind of word that's just in your vernacular. It just slips out and you're not even thinking about it. And then you hear the reply from the flat earther, experiment, you say? And you go, oh, shit.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Oh, boy. Just reminiscing, right? Mm-mm-mm. Very important. All right, we ready to roll?
So we've taken ourselves out reminiscing about writing.
You created savages.
That was the whole point. I arm you with a chainsaw. Or sometimes if you're not ready or prepared to wield that chainsaw, you cut off your own arms. That happened plenty of times along the way. We could get into that discussion. I don't want to go down there, but I remember that time that we talked about that, Nathan. I said, this is a chainsaw, but be careful. Yeah. All right, let's roll. And mainly back to Mitchell's point and the total overall point that we were talking about, obviously hypothesis. And if I'm in any discussion, like I said, there's no time to pull out or it's just logistically unsound. There's no screen sharing capabilities and no one's watching. I pull out my pink table So immediately when I hear experiment, what's the hypothesis? Why would I say that? Well, because it's going to end their dreams quick. Because, like I said, number one, they don't know what a hypothesis is. When I say they, I mean all baltards. I have yet to have a single baltard in over 5.5 years give me a hypothesis regarding anything. Not only flat earth, not flat earth stuff. Just any viable scientific hypothesis. Can't do it. They don't know what it is. A scientific hypothesis is your experiment statement. So as soon as you say experiment, then you immediately invoke hypothesis. That's why I say, give me the hypothesis. It expresses a testable proposed cause and effect relationship, the phenomena that was observed in step 1. So, is this QE scientific method? Did QE create hypothesis, the word, and then define it? Let's see how important this is. Even from one of the king pseudoscientists that walks around like he's a scientist in the spinning ball space monkey religion, and one of their, like I said, one of their chief pseudoscientists from nature.com, one of the premier science journals in the entire world. California Institute of Technology physicist Sean Carroll arguing in The Edge that hypotheses aren't simply useful tools in some potentially outmoded vision of science. They're the whole point. So, he can talk the talk. He surely can't walk the walk, because this is correct, right? He just said it right plain in plain sight for you, right? They are the whole point. You must have a hypothesis to get to the experiment, which is required. Follow? So he's got it. He knows it. Of course, he doesn't put it into practice. That's why when anyone says experiment, I say, give me the hypothesis. And that's when it circles the drain at light speed. For them, I just sit back and light the stogie and kick up the heels, because it's going to go to a train wreck, as it usually does. So what is a scientific hypothesis? From Lowell C., Strategic Think for Scientific Discovery, Becoming a Successful Scientist from Cambridge. A scientific hypothesis is based on, we've seen this before, haven't we? Remember? We breached this topic up above with experiment. Well, if experiments cause and effect, you know scientific hypothesis has to be based on cause and effect. Right? So it's based on cause and effect reasoning. Duh. Nothing else. Do you see any other reasoning here? The reason why you don't is because it's not there. Do you see Aunt Jenny's tomato haul from last September? No, it's not in there because it's not part of it. A scientific hypothesis does not merely state X and Y may be related, but explains why they're related. Now, see, this is what Scrat brought up. Explain, explanations. Explanations deal with the hows and the whys. Descriptions only deal with what's and is's. A lot of people don't even understand that. They have no foundation. That's the problem. From Drexel University, scientific method is hypothesis-driven. One makes an educated guess to explain what? Cause and effect relationship. Another conspiracy. They must be talking to each other. From Anne-Marie Helmenstein, PhD, Biomedical Sciences, a hypothesis is an educated guess based on observation. It's a prediction. We've seen this word a couple times, right? That's where the prediction is. Prediction of cause and effect. Is there anything else? Prediction of anything else? No, she stopped with a period because it doesn't have anything to do with anything else. It's an educated guess. When people say a hypothesis is a guess, I tell them they're wrong. They're wrong because it's incomplete. If I only give you half the story, it's incomplete. It's incorrect. Right? I got into a brouhaha with one of the baltards a couple weeks ago over this. He said, a hypothesis is just an educated guess. Well, he didn't say educated. He said guess. At first, I said, no. Incorrect. Because it's incomplete. Why? Because he left out the rest of it. From Colorado State, scientific hypothesis, a special kind of prediction that forecasts how the independent variable will affect the dependent variable. That's it right there. The most concise definition is that one right there. Huh? And another thing, I get accused of citing kids' references or sources. We could go back up all the way to the top. I'm not going to do that. I'll just stop right here and do it. So this is elementary school reference. That's Nature. This is Cambridge University Press. This is Drexel University. Are these grade schools, elementary schools? Anne-Marine Helmestein, PhD Biomedical Sciences. That doesn't look like elementary school or primary school. Colorado State. Is Colorado State a elementary school? What about Penn State? The scientist applies his or her present knowledge to predict, there it is again, the effect of the independent variable on the dependent variable. The prediction, twice, is a statement of the expected results of the experiment based on what? Hypothesis. It's often an if and then statement. Doesn't have to be, but often it is. Is Penn State elementary school? Where it come from? So it's preposterous. What are they? Like I said, they just make stuff up. That's all they're doing. Just make stuff up. Just vague, ambiguous claims, baseless. That they just put it out there. That's it, and then move on to the next topic. Can one of the ballers come in here and show us how these are elementary school sources? Even if they were, you still got a big problem. Why are they teaching nonsense in elementary schools? Well, they're not. But I digress. You know what I mean. Hypothesis. Back again to Kristen McClellan, The Nature of Science and the Scientific Method. The hypothesis should also contain a prediction. Uh-oh. They must be in cahoots with the rest of these guys. Prediction everywhere. About its verifiability. For example, if a hypothesis is true, then 1 should happen when 2 is manipulated. What's number 1? The first blank is the dependent variable. Of course it is, because that's the first step of the scientific method. That's where the observed natural phenomena was. That gives you your dependent variable or your effect. What's the next step? Well, we want to find out what causes this in the natural world. The first blank one is the dependent variable. It depends on what you're doing in the second blank. And the second blank, number 2, is what? Independent variable. The cause, of course, because it's a cause and effect relationship. You manipulate it to get a reaction. You manipulate it. You see this? You. There should be no other variables in the experiment that may affect the dependent variable. Why? You don't want a bogus result. You can't have 2 independent variables. That's a different type of hypothesis. A complex hypothesis, we'll deal with that down below, but that's not part of science, natural science. That has nothing to do with it. We're into cause and effect. We're into empiricism. From California State, is that an elementary school too? Formalized hypotheses contain, shocking surprise, 2 variables. One is the independent and the other is the dependent. The independent is the one you, the scientist, control. They shouldn't have used that. The scientists manipulate, and the dependent variable is the one that you observe and or measure the results. Notice there are 2 parts to formalized hypotheses. The if portion contains the testable proposed relationship, and the then portion is the prediction, there it is again, right, of the expected results from an experiment. An acceptable hypothesis contains both aspects, not just the prediction portion. Back to the University of Rochester Physics Lab. The scientific method requires, remember we went over this before, that a hypothesis be ruled out or modified if its predictions are clearly and repeatedly incompatible with experimental tests. That is the University of Rochester Elementary School. Back to the prediction, right? We already went over this scientific hypothesis. Special kind of prediction forecasts how the independent variable will affect the dependent variable. Again, from Colorado State. From the University of North Carolina Elementary School, In an experiment, the independent variable is a variable that is varied or manipulated by the researcher. See that? By the researcher. And the dependent variable is a response that is measured. An independent variable is the presumed cause, shocking surprise, whereas the dependent variable is the presumed effect. The IV is the antecedent, whereas the DB is the consequent. See, it just follows, it flows, right? If a hypothesis must have an independent variable and a dependent variable and is based solely on cause and effect reasoning, then the independent variable, one of them has to be the cause and the other is the effect, right? It just flows that way. Oh, this is a good one. And I just changed this because I wanted to bring this subject up. Or, you know what? Let's stop right there. Questions, comments? I caught you guys off guard.
Well, there was a couple of points on it. You mentioning it, and I suppose Mitchell Nathan will be able to say the points you're actually now dealing with. None of us have to deal with any of the housekeeping questions, yeah? Look at what's being thrown. Attacking what you're quoting and citing in terms of where they're from. The trivium that we're having to defend, it to me, it's an indictment of what's left of their argument.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think if I look at Mitchell's chat and what comes in after Nathan's show now, because they ain't coming on the main show, now this is all we are left with. Very weak arguments that really have nothing to do, like I said, with the fact that they can't deal with the housekeeping questions at all.
Yep. Yeah, this is all cut and dry. Like I said, there's no wiggle room here. Because it's obvious. It's blatantly self-evident the way I go through these. I didn't make them up. Right? It follows logically. You're like, if you're a reasonable person, you don't even have to have a science degree. Right? Everything that I just said thus far, you're like, oh, okay, yeah. It can't be anything else. That's where I stand.
Comment on that. You said somebody had said that these are lower school references, which obviously they weren't. Just clear that up first of all. Yes, it was rhetorical, but no, none of those citations that you read out were from. Did you say from grade school or something?
Yeah, elementary school or primary school, same thing.
Primary school, elementary school, right? Well, even if they were, what would that matter? If it's right, it's right. It doesn't matter if it's from a primary school source or not. Who cares?
That's what I was going to say. What's the difference?
Well,
If it's right, it's right. Who cares?
Yeah. We're taught 2 + 2 = 4 at primary school.
Correct.
Doesn't matter what level you then go to. High school, degree, yeah, professorship. That actually holds true, doesn't it? So the level at which you learn it doesn't denigrate its truth, does it?
In many ways, the opposite. So we're talking about earlier Dr. John Dee going back to his education and pulling apart some of the things that have been asserted as science. Well, these are very high education levels that we're talking about being pulled apart. Well, that should say it all, right? They're not infallible. They're not. They're fallible. So to say that it's higher education, therefore right? No, quite the contrary. But we're all pointing out that we learn about the scientific method really early in schooling, maybe not in primary school, but still really early. You're going to say, well, because you learnt that in high school, that it doesn't make sense anymore because it was diluted thereafter? No, it doesn't make any difference what the source is. I know why QE's pointing it out. It's because they use that as some sort of attack like, oh, this is pathetic. This is like primary school level stuff. It's just stupid. And it's like, well, does it matter where the citation's from, number one? But it isn't. You know, these are coming from universities, obviously. That's why every time QE quotes anything or cites anything ever, he'll tell you where it's from, before or after. So I don't really get that criticism other than people just hand waving it. But there we go.
That was my point. And that's all they've got left. And that's all we've got left to comment on, to point out that even what they're throwing at that desperate attempt, they're primary school sources, yeah? Well, if we address them with a critical and honest mind, a grown-up mind, all us, yeah? Even that comment, look how weak it is, and look how much it demonstrates the weaknesses of your argument that's left. That's all you've got to throw at us. And even that is, what? School ground tactics, which are demonstrably incorrect, as we talked about 2 + 2. Yeah?
It's a tell.
You have nothing left.
It's a tell.
Yeah.
That's all they got. They're just, it's like delusional Elmer Fudd's in the gallery and Tiger Woods just tearing up the Masters course. But he's throwing little pebbles out at Tiger. That's all they're doing. They don't realize. It's so hilarious. They think that their little feeble attempts, right, are changing it. They're not changing anything. You're not convincing anyone. People are laughing at you. I'm going to finish it up with this one. Sorry. This is really good. This brings back memories because, especially on Nathan's show, because, and it still happens these days, where they presuppose. That is, they make an assumption, a begging the question fallacy, right? And I hear a lot of people, and it's been through the years and recently, this has come up. That's why I added this. This is very important. It's subtle, but it's important. Check this out. A scientific hypothesis is a supposition, not a presupposition. A presupposition and a supposition are two different animals. A supposition has the connotation that the idea or theory is testable or provable. It's tentative, provisional, in other words, as opposed to a presupposition is something that you believe is true without having any proof. It is assumed to be true beforehand. It's not tentative. It's ironclad. You see the subtle difference here? They sound like they could be the same, but they're not. It's very important difference between these two. So the hypothesis is a supposition. It's just tentative, provisional, as opposed to a presupposition. I could have put an assumption here. Same thing. Presupposition is assumption. And what's that? You believe it's true without having any proof, so it's not tentative. It's ironclad. I'll leave this up here for a couple minutes. Maybe there's a nuance here, right? And you say, oh, semantics. Yeah. Yes, it is. Prosecution rests. Questions, comments. We're gonna stop right here for today.
You might have to define your last point. Some of the audience might not understand what you mean when you go semantics. Well, yes, it is. They might think, isn't that self-defeating? Because they don't understand what you mean. Just explain what you mean.
Yeah, semantics. Yeah, semantics. And I think we went over semantics at the beginning of this science presentation. It was in the part A. Semantics is the defining of words. It's using the Socratic method to define terms so you're on the same sheet of music. It's the basis of all communication, right? You must define your terms. And I always use the example of the apple and the orangutan. You know, if I'm talking about an apple, right, and you're thinking it's an orangutan, then we're going to miscommunicate right off the bat. It's going to be confusion, and then one of us is going to get frustrated, probably both of us, and it's just going to circle the drain. And if you have an audience, they're just going to be back there laughing, right? So semantics, yeah, it's very important. It's the basis of the scientific method and natural science. You must define your terms. Hyper-specificity. Go back to the first presentation where you have a scientist telling you that. Why? I'm asking myself, why would they even have to tell you that? Good?
Perfect. Just to bring us back onto point that you wanted people to comment on at the end of the presentation, which is the difference between supposition and presupposition. So, has anybody got any comment on the last part?
Yeah,
This part of the Go ahead.
Did you say that the presumption or presupposition was ironclad, or
Yes.
they think it's iron?
Now, presupposition is an assumption, and an assumption that it's self-evident, assumed to be true beforehand, period.
I
So
always think
when they presuppose, sorry, go ahead. All right, when they presuppose that a moon is orbiting, to say that's ironclad, they're presupposing that. I'm confused because I thought ironclad meant it's that's the way it is.
No. There's no. There. It's not tentative. See, the juxtaposition is the tentative or the provisional status. A supposition is provisional, whereas a presupposition or an assumption is not provisional. It's not tentative. They're going to roll with that, in other words.
Okay.
Give you an example, Strat. Say it with the presuppositional statement. If I'm calculating very carefully precisely how much hay unicorns digest and working out their digestive tracts, all of that is predicated that unicorns exist. I'm working with a presupposition and doing all the maths for the presupposition because that statement about unicorns being real, when I do the maths for how their digestive system works, that's a presupposition that's ironclad. In other words, that has to be the case. Otherwise, why else would I be calculating unicorn digestion? So the presupposition is ironclad. So when your example, just to transfer that over to your example with orbital mechanics, if you work on the basis of how the moon's movement will affect the tides, and it's because of its movement that the tides are affected, you're going to be working with an ironclad presupposition that is going to be as a result of something you've assumed, in this case, an orbital path for the moon around the Earth. So whatever goes after that ironclad statement, it's taken as read. I can't think of any other ways to phrase it, but that's why it's a fallacy, because it isn't necessarily true. So in my example, well, I can calculate how much they digest and how they digest and the cause of their digestion and all these things. But if thing isn't actually real, my ironclad assumption, my presupposition, is just a fallacy. It's invalid.
Got it. Thank you very much. I understand now.
I'd take it that there's two words there. One is a derivation of the second meaning. Its meaning is fundamentally based on the formers. So if I think of like Sherlock Holmes, supposition is where you're going to go and, if he has a supposition, he's not just got an idea, he's off to go and prove it. So a supposition is something you're going to go and prove. So a presupposition, fundamentally, to me, you may disclaim it with it's self-evident, but from the English, it's something you've yet to even go and prove. It's before that. It's less. But fundamentally, a supposition inside is something you're about to go and take forward with. Not something you assume, it's something you're about to then go and apply your knowledge to. Everything you've learnt, you're then going to suppose and test this supposition.
Shout out to obviously, one second. Shout out to obviously, Sarah says, fantastic presentation as usual. Well, thank you. It's a tell no science deniers claiming to represent science will do a presentation detailing the specifics of the scientific method with citations. You're exactly right. Obviously, Sarah says, thank you very much.
Yeah, and further to that, you'd think they'd be the first to do it, as they're the ones going around barking that they've got science and that we're science deniers, as this presentation kicked off with that sentiment. But there we go. Adam spoke earlier of the beauty of this method, and in the supposition, that's where the genius lies. So if you can suppose something as the cause of an effect, and then put it through the method, that would be to say validate the cause, systematic experimentation being the method's choice way of doing that. If you get it right, then essentially you've guessed, supposed, what the cause was correctly. Now at that point, it's validated. And that's why it's a genius method, because anybody performing the method has to, in the hypothesis, formulate a null. And the null is the antithesis of your best guess. So your supposition of cause, as your supposition of cause presented in the null as being non-causal, the thing you're studying. So if my genius idea that this will cause the effect, then it doesn't cause the effect, is the null. And that's the beauty for me, as I said earlier, with this method, because the end of the process has an empirical result either way. You're going to be validating something if you're doing an experiment, if you've done it correctly. So that, to me, is where the genius lies, and comes from the ability to suppose something as a cause and then move forward, as Adam says. That's why it's termed that way. It's yet to be validated. Your supposition is yet to be validated. Like total contrast, a presupposition is taken as read from the outset. But let's maths unicorn digestion. Why? Well, because it's taken as read that unicorns are real. Don't even need to concern ourselves with that. That's set in stone already. Well, that's not genius. That's fallacious.
Precisely. It's begging the question.
I love it every time you bring up the null, because every time you mention it, it reminds me of that bonehead Jim Panda when he told me that the only thing you can prove in science is the null. And every time I think of it, I just can't help but laugh.
Tough, right?
It's kind of true for the humanities, sociology, psychology, that's kind of where, because you can't prove cause and effect. What you can kind of do in the humanities, outside of the scientific method, but the humanities kind of hijack the empiricism of the method. That's what you can demonstrate in that field, and that's probably where that misnomer comes from, where the null is king, to say. That's not to say it doesn't have validity, but in science, the null has benefit to move forwards, but we really want to validate that H1 with validity. Whereas, let's say, with the humanities, that's an impossibility. So we really try to use the H0 there in that situation. It's more useful because it's not science most fundamentally, you see.
Cold in your shed, Adam?
A little bit.
The nice 55 hertz fan you've got going there.
I was just thinking the same thing. I knew you were thinking it too. I was going to say, is he going to say something?
I noticed it at the beginning of the show. I just wasn't going to drop it in when there was, we're later in the show now. We're a bit more laid back. The presentation's, is it done? I was going to ask earlier.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, let's wrap it up. We'll get to null hypothesis next week. It's not a hurry.
Yeah, we're rounding out the discussion on it anyway, so it's the perfect thing to tail off with next week. And I like these hyper-focused shows on the scientific method. I remember when you first laid it out for me, you were like, this is good because you're like basically retarded and you don't know anything.
I did not say that.
No, the way you said it was you're a blank canvas. You've not gone through the education system to be poisoned. Now, when you described it that way, I've described it on the show as having it diluted down as you go further and further into the education system. Well, he's saying, well, you didn't go through that. So when I explain it to you now, it'll resonate in a way that it won't resonate necessarily with people who have got an idea that what they describe when they put a control group together is science. They're going to be much more attached to that idea than you, who hasn't got a horse in the race. And you're absolutely right about that. I haven't got a horse in the race. But that's why I put in the disclaimers earlier about Dr. John Dee. When he's going back and Adam saying he's a monster now. Well, actually, no, I don't see that. I see him as going through and doing the logical thing that you would do if you reassessed it from this standpoint. How he got to that standpoint, even if you're a colleague of his, who cares? Does it matter? You know, so long as it's the same as back to, is it a primary school source? Does it matter? He's just looking at it and trying to be rigorous in his research and his, what's the word? Research. Revision, that's the word I was looking for. He's revising, going back through things he's done. To me, it's admirable. That's the logical thing to do. And it doesn't matter that you're only doing it having somebody tap on your shoulder and say, don't necessarily use this word. It's not the right word for that, what you're doing. Does it matter? No, not really. But the reason for the shows is to give everybody in the audience a level of appreciation that if you're new here and you're like, why am I being called a science denier? Did I claim any science? What science was I claiming? I tried to point out that all maps are flat and suddenly I've got this barrage of hate. Why am I getting that? Why am I being called a science denier? Well, Adam alluded to it earlier. If you've got a really weak part of your argument, and that is, if you're the powers that should not be in a hypothetical scenario where you're looking down on everyone you control like the puppet master, you go, a lot of them are using this magic trick and calling things science when they're not. That could potentially be a bit of a problem. So maybe if any of our opponents ever point that out, best to call them science deniers and ridicule them for not understanding science rather than letting them highlight too much that actually we haven't got any. Call them science deniers. Likewise, people are starting to point out that things aren't actually going over an Earth curve edge when they hit the horizon. I know, let's give them an edge and tell them that they've got boats falling over it while we simultaneously claim boats go over a horizon edge. Because then it won't be so harsh when they start pointing out that they claim they can see too far. If that changes in the near future, when they can just see stuff we are claiming is behind Earth curve and isn't. We would hope that they can just be ridiculed for having boats falling over a pizza pie. So let's give them that because it's a really weak part of our argument. Likewise, science, call them science deniers. Flat earthers, call them science deniers. Hopefully they'll never actually get any traction when they're pointing out that we haven't got any science when we claim it for our heliocentric model.
Cool. Let's wrap it on up.
No. I was going to say, you might as well wrap up this, other than the Ballbusters, to get some final words from. We've just got scrap. That's it. There's no other members of the public. I should really say that. You used to say at the beginning of the show, this is actually a public show. You can actually join if you're watching this live, and there are a fair few people watching, and you can challenge anything that's being said here.
Yes. It's a good point.
As you're suggesting we round out, I think it's an excellent point because you'll get your chicken wings. I'll get to plug my show with plenty of time.
Yep.
Owen will probably recover when he's heard his name mentioned because he's dropped. Immediately, as soon as I said his name, he dropped.
There, he's back again.
Hopefully, Owen will sober up a bit and maybe give us a plug for his show.
Sober up a bit. You really have to say that every time. Thanks. No, I was making dinner. All that food talk at the beginning of the show, like I had this dinner I was gonna make. It takes kind of a lot of work, so it took me the entire Ballbuster show. But I'm sure it was great.
I'm sure we should talk about it for at least the next 20 minutes as QE's giving hints that he would like to round up soon. Let's talk about food for the next 20 minutes.
No, I'm just gonna enjoy it and plug my show. So
I actually had a question.
We'll get to you, Scrat.
Don't plug your show, Owen. It's not that time. We hadn't asked for that yet. I had Scrat. Scrat.
All right.
Go ahead, Scrat.
Okay, is it okay if it's not on the scientific method?
Yes, it is. It's fine.
Okay, natural law. Basically, natural laws are just descriptions of what happens always in nature, correct?
Correct.
Okay, how are they established? I mean, are they like officially like for instance, like the first law and second law of thermodynamics. Who established those?
Oh, back in the day, you're talking late 1800s. Laws of thermodynamics. The second law of thermodynamics, Clausius, Carathéodory, and Lord Kelvin, and Carnot. So those four, those are the big guys with the second law of thermodynamics.
Okay, so but when they establish it, I mean, who actually sets it up where everybody knows that, you know, this is a natural law? And in people in science, they're taught this is what nature does. This is a natural law. How do you get one established?
How do you get?
Okay, let's explain. I'll explain why I'm asking this. For instance, relative density. We know that everything in nature always seeks equilibrium. When it's taken out of equilibrium, it automatically tries to get back into equilibrium. That always happens. We don't know why it happens. We just know it always does. Everything seeks equilibrium in nature. How come that's not a natural law?
It is.
It is. Go ahead.
Oh, I never heard that described. Okay, sorry. Okay, never mind then.
Okay, I was lucky enough to be privileged to listen to a conversation between Dr. John D, Adam, and Quantum Eraser, which lasted, Neil, can you put yourself on mute? Lasted for about 2 weeks, maybe. Maybe it was less, maybe it was more. I can't quite remember. It was a long time ago. That exact question was discussed at length. Now, I kept quiet and just listened. And the end conclusion was that what you've just described is a second order effect of entropy. That is the most concise description I can give, having listened to most of those discussions. So it is a natural law. When you say everything seeks equilibrium, does that not sound familiar? Does that not sound like part of the second law of thermodynamics that you're describing straight away off the bat? Because it is.
Grat.
You're breaking up. But you're breaking up. What I will say just to round this out is thank you, Quantum Eraser, Dr. John D, and Adam. I got to sound really intelligent just then.
Too funny.
I think that was a lot of head banging, wasn't it? And that's about the best way you can describe it if you're trying to put it into natural law. I do like that still.
Am I still roboting?
No, now you're rumpusing.
Yeah.
Hold on, Neil. Hold on, Kiwi. Hold on, everyone. Go ahead, Scrat.
Oh, well, I thought it would be the law, but when I think of like a rock falling, or a apple falling from a tree, that does.
Scrat, listen up. Drop out and come back in again, sir. You hear me?
I think he's on the move.
Location.
You're on the move, aren't you?
Can't get through to him because if he can, you pop yourself on mute because otherwise we'll have to serve and mute you. I'm really sorry. Yeah, I've got another new face as well. So it's this guy, something like that.
My name is Khalil.
Cornell, like in Superman.
No, yeah, kind of, sort of. Yeah, I guess you could say it's everybody's version of Kal-El.
Oh, did you have a question on anything that we've presented here?
Actually, to be honest, I actually kind of got in a little bit late, so I'm trying to catch up with what you guys were just talking about.
That's okay, but did you join because you had a question in general then?
Yeah, I did. It's kind of a basic question because I'm pretty new to Flat Earth, and I was just hoping that you guys would be able to answer it for me. I know it's kind of off topic from what you guys were speaking about earlier.
That's fine. Go ahead.
Well, my first question is, and I do, recently I just started accepting or becoming firmly grounded on the aspect of, geocentrism. Would it be now? And I remember I was listening earlier to you guys in one of your past live shows, speaking about the distance from the sun, and I just wanted to get a little bit more clarity on that. And I know this is something that the ball earthers, specifically the heliocentrists, they have to prove the distance of the sun. But I was just wondering if is there like a mainstream flat earther view of what the distance of the sun is?
Yes, there is. Maybe.
Can I give it?
No, I have that, Nave. Just
Yeah, good.
there is a mainstream view about the distance to the sun from flat earthers, and that would be that there is no distance to the sun.
It's over there.
No clue.
No, it's not no clue. Well, yeah, it is no clue, but fundamentally, it's not how it's described in the heliocentric model. Whatever we're rendering isn't describable in that paradigm, that 3D, just 3D dimensional space. I don't think that's what we receive. That's what we see. The behavior of the luminaries kind of demonstrates that. And therefore, all I'd say is that I don't think you can transpose that kind of 3D heliocentric viewpoint into any whatever. Me and Arwin, for example, our viewpoints will be vastly different individually, yeah, but I don't think the thing we'd share is that you can't transpose that heliocentric way of viewing it, that it's just kilometers. That makes sense.
Okay.
Plus, can a intangible thing have a distance?
We don't even know what it is.
Well, that depends on what you mean with intangible.
As it stands, no. Correct. As far as we are concerned, as it stands, it's an intangible object. So how can you ascribe a distance to it? Does that mean that I'm going to say, by fact, that means it's hologrammatic or anything else that I could describe? No. I'll just say I don't know if I'm ever in the slightest bit tried to be pinned to the wall on what it is, because I don't know. So I don't know. So might it have a distance? It might have. If somebody was to firmly assert, no, it definitely doesn't have a distance. I'm like, well, how do you know it doesn't have a distance? So we just don't know what we don't know in terms of the sun. That to me is fascinating.
Nathan, do you think that me, you, Arwin, Neil, Mitchell, Huey share even a similarity as to the causation for its intangibility? Because I would suggest we'd all have different viewpoints on that. We'd all say it's intangible, but as to what its intangibility is and why, I think we'd all hold different views there.
Exactly. Which I would celebrate, so long as they're laid down as opinions. Arwin's got plenty of in terms of the sun. And some of them are absolutely amazing. But we still don't know.
Okay. Well, I mean, the reason why I asked that was because when I first was introduced to Flat Earth, I was introduced to a book. I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with it. I think it's 200 Proofs that the Earth is not a spinning ball. Forgot his name. I think it's Eric Dubé. I think that's his name is. If I'm not mistaken.
Never heard of it. Have you got a link for that?
Carry on. Just ignore the sarcasm. Carry on.
Sorry, I'm.
Oh no! I kind of sensed the sarcasm. That was the first thing I looked into. Actually, I mean, I wanted to get like a basic introduction to it, and so that was the book that was recommended to me.
And this freaking thing.
Neil, can you pop yourself on mute? Just to
I
get
don't
you
know
back
how
on
it
track.
keeps coming off of you.
So just to get you back on track, you were saying that in regards to Eric DeBay's standpoint on this, there's something in 200 proofs regards the distance to the sun. Feel free to carry on.
Well, yeah, that was so in that book he mentions that I guess through sextants and I forgot what else he said, but through sextants he pretty much came up with the figure of the radius of the sun being 32 miles and the distance of the sun being 3,000 miles. So I mean, from what you guys are saying, I mean, it's if it's intangible and you can't really determine the distance, would you say that that's based on speculation then to say it's like about 3,000 miles?
So you can calculate it to be that, but you don't know the actual size. So it's only got an apparent size. So part of the measurement, you'd need to know how big it physically was. You can't get that as it moves across the sky. This is an interesting subject that hasn't actually been crossed on the debate. I didn't expect it to come on Ballbusters, but fine. There's a danger that you can make that claim because there's an application, if you've been paying attention recently, in terms of how the sextant's used. So you can make an assumption that you've got a ceiling that's parallel with the ground below. You've got a flat baseline and a flat ceiling. And utilizing the angle to that light, in this case the sun, you can triangulate your position. Right? In other words, you can work out one of the sides of the triangle. And you're saying, well, why don't you just say the other side of the triangle and say you've got the height, right? That's what Eric DeBay's doing. Well, that is how it works, and that does successfully navigate you around the surface. But for me, now that fine for Eric, it's a step too far, then extrapolate out that distance because you don't know what you're dealing with. In terms of a path along the ground, you actually can make that journey and arrive at that location below the star's position. So it does actually function correctly. But for me personally, it's a step too far to take that measurement. I don't know if anybody else has got an opinion. That's where I thought you were going, actually, when I sided and you said, is there a mainstream opinion in terms of the distance to the sun from flat Earth? That's exactly where I thought you were going with that. Go ahead. Is anybody else?
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah, I do. Trigonometrically, you could figure out that side. That's just the opposite side. So if you really want to hold the ball-tards to task, you could figure it out. It's 3,000 to 4,000, which depends on what measurement or elevation angle you take. But you could do it, right?
I think that's the majesty of the heavens, and Alwyn understands this better than me, or certainly explains the way they render better. Doesn't work just trigonometrically, and that the way it renders is for us to navigate, yeah. But that doesn't fit a pattern in terms of it being stars above our head on a rotating disc. You know, like I've showed that thing. It doesn't work like that. It works for us. It doesn't work logically as a mechanism. Yeah, but it renders individually, and that's kind of the best I can describe it with all my life.
Let me have a back, right? If you've ever heard... Oh, sorry, Adam.
The final bit, I remember getting a tip a long time ago, and the way is the Masons. They have a square and a compass, and the square is for the plane on which we dwell, and the compass is to explain the movement of the stars and how they move. They don't fit properly, but what they do for us, I'll summarize again, is they work for us. Yeah, and the sextant demonstrates that. How they don't fit or comport to a heliocentric model or a flat earther's understanding of the heavens is kind of irrelevant. But what they do is work for us.
Yeah, but the answer is he's saying the distance to the sun, though. You could do it trigonometrically.
Yeah, but do you think that's real? That's the point I'm making. Is that distance where they are? Or is that the point that of renderance for us trigonometrically?
I would say trigonometrically it's sound, right? You're just finding the opposite side of the right triangle, correct?
Yes, that is what it's doing. I hate that we're laying it out this way.
I know.
Wait a
Yeah,
second. We have
yeah,
it
It's not a blunder.
now?
It's not a
Yeah, I'm
blunder.
kind of sorry about that.
No,
I
don't
didn't mean-
don't apologize. It was a good question.
Apologize. Oh, this is good. This is good. Excellent. In fact.
Yeah, it was just
I'm smiling while I'm saying that. Don't worry. Don't worry.
no. I
Can
was
I
because
interrupt something?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's just about the whole triangulation situation, right? So the triangulation system is only kind of an assistance to try to place a coordinate based on a presuppositional layout of what you're standing on. And in the disk presupposing system, then it does line up pretty accurately, not super accurately. But where the problem really comes in is where you try to confirm that it is actually in that presupposed position. So if you approach the sun, what happens? You know,
Move.
I suspect it's not going to be exactly where you think it is. And is it going to grow in angular size to you as the observer? I have not seen any test of this. Where's the Icarus test? You know?
Exactly. Who's doing it? That's it. Icarus was where I was going to go next. That with the perfect segue. Exactly. Do it. Go up there. Go up to that distance and see if you can get to the sun. Touch the thing. But now that's within the realms of possibility. Doesn't that excite people watching? It does me. So who's going to be the first to touch the sun? It's only over there, according to this triangulation measurement. But as I said originally, that's a step too far for me. I don't think that's a reasonable thing to deduce, because you're not actually making that journey to confirm that that's where it is.
Exactly. But that's the majesty of the heavens, because trigonometrically it works. But I think in my heart, if we could go to that point that I calculate, I don't think it'd be there. It'd move and it'd tell me something else if I worked it out properly. It'd help me navigate if I was there, if that was within the containment, if that's, you know what I mean? And that's the whole point from a skeptic point of view. Wherever we calculate that point to be trigonometrically, I don't even know whether that would be inside or outside of the containment, or within, or set within the containment. I've got a bit of a clue, actually. But do you get me? To be able to confirm that, I'm presupposing so many things. Use a word.
I have to
There's
admit.
another thing that
Hold on a second. Hold on a second. I'd have to admit that I held the baller to task because we were discussing the sextant, and this subject came up a couple of weeks ago, and it was on. I can't remember what server it was on. Anyway, somebody asked, "Well, why can't you get the distance to the sun?" And I'm sitting back there waiting. He wasn't asking me. It was just a general question to the group, and I'm looking at the baller. Right? Because he's going on about he screwed up the sextant anyway, but at least he knew the trig. Right? So I'm sitting back there waiting and waiting. And it was silence. And I said, I said his name. I said, go ahead, tell him. You can go ahead and tell him. You know the elevation, right? Or you know that the opposite side of the triangle. Go ahead, do it. I gave him a couple numbers. I said 50-degree elevation angle and the distance to the GP. I said, go ahead, figure it out trigonometrically. And tell him the distance. And it was something like 3,450 miles or something. I said, there you go. And just prosecution. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the reason this will never become an issue in terms of our assertion when made by what I'd consider to be careless flat earthers, but we won't get into that. The reason it won't become an issue between us debating with bull believers is because they utilize that measurement. So that triangulation just has an R value inserted to give them the distances. This is exemplified by smokescreen design versus red rhetoric versus Jeranism. So a part B video of Distance to the Moon by Jeranism was pulled apart by red rhetoric, who described and then inserted R. That was pulled apart by Smokescreen Design. It was a really early video. And at the time, he's even said this because we had him on the show once. he explained that when he was pulling that apart and saying, look, he just inserts R here. But for the fact that he's asserting R, you get the distance to B by way of triangulation. So in other words, they do it also. And that was Red's Rhetoric doing it in the maths, just they insert R. So because they utilize that, they're never going to pull us apart and say, well, you're getting it by triangulation. It's like, yeah, so do you, but then you insert R.
Correct me if I'm wrong, though. When we're doing these calculations, these trigonometric calculations, we've got a distance to a GP of something like, we use the sun as an example. So we know the distance to the GP of the sun. We've got an angle to the sun using something like a sextant. We do that once. Yeah, that's fine. We can get a height, if you will, to the sun. If we wait something like a couple of hours and we do it again, obviously we've got a different distance to the GP of the sun. We've got a different angle. Correct me if I'm wrong, does that come out as a different height, or is it always the same height when we're doing this trigonometrically?
Oh, it's the same. So the angular change is attributed to distance as opposed to anything else. It's just attributed to distance from the observer.
Yep. Yeah.
So
if you had a bunch of different ones, back on Adam, what Adam said, if you had a bunch of different, you could do it yourself and find out the opposite side. They're not going to differ by that much.
I'd maybe stand corrected with the exception of the moon. There may be some adjustments for that, but 10th would have to detail that. The moon's funky and it's treated and it does its own, or she does her own thing. But I think as for everything else, no, it's plainer.
Yeah, because I remember reading. I'm sorry. No, I was saying I remember reading from. I think it was a quote from Samuel Rowbotham that I think he mentioned somewhere within the lines of 700 miles from the distance between the Earth and the Sun. Also, so I mean, these you're getting different figures here or different measurements. So I guess it goes back to whoever's doing the trigonometry or doing the triangulation. Sorry.
Yeah, if he was doing it, if he was doing the triangle or the trigonometry, he wasn't. I haven't read that. That's the first I've heard of that. Somebody screwed that up.
Yeah, but
well, if you can do that with wouldn't the sun and the moon have to be the same distance then?
Yeah, you've got everything running on a flat ceiling. That was something at first I was hesitant to just say out loud. But in terms of the way this works, I'm going to say the way it is, in terms of the way it works. And you've got that triangulation being done at a greater distance. In other words, the sun's dropping towards the horizon when you're further away from it. It'll give you a different height, all on the same exact plane. That is to say that all of the lights in the sky running along the same flat sky. Now, in terms of the way you will visualize that, because of the way perspective works, you end up with a metaphorical dome around you, dome of your vision. That's how you can triangulate it, because it's moving away from you and moving lower towards the horizon as it does so.
Can I stop you for a second? Because I think we're mixing up a couple different concepts here. I'm not, what I said is not triangulation, even though you're using a right angle triangle. I think we're talking about two different things, because you're using Red's rhetoric that was two different people with different elevation angles. I'm just with the sextant, just using a simple triangle with the GP, with the distance to the GP and the elevation angle. Follow? Yeah. I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Yeah. That's when I say it works. It works to navigate, right? Now, there are all sorts of discrepancies, like one describes if you go up in a balloon, the sun moves. It's not, it renders for you all of this. Yeah, now, part of the anomaly is if you do this, then actually, if you want to triangulate two individual locations to a particular location in the heavens, then the only way that works is to push it out to infinity, all of it out to infinity. Yeah, and that's the baller's best argument, and it's not really an argument, it's not a validation, it's just the only way to solve it if you present the problem as triangulation of two people to looking at a supposed same point, and that's the error in their logic. They presume it's the same point. It renders for that it doesn't. It just your simple own sphere of vision proves that false. But that's what they do to them, and therefore the mathematical solution, the only way to resolve that mathematically, is to push everything out to infinity. So yeah, that's Red's rhetoric.
You're defining two different philosophical worldviews when you make that statement, though, aren't you? In terms of the way they position themselves in reality and the way we position ourselves in reality. That's how they do it. They push everything out to infinity. They make us insignificant, as opposed to, no, you've just got stars above you rendered for you at your position for you, and that's unique to your position.
Yeah.
That sounds like my view on it. The holographic personal view of the Celestials.
Well, that's just by
from a
fact what we have
mathematical
got.
point, Nate. They're changing the question. So they're changing the question of validity, as to prove their point. So whereas we would say, can we use the sextant to get around accurately, individually, and that validates for us. What they say is we've got this anomaly, that if we push it out to, and this is why it's a modern concept, and why these things got further and further away. Because the way to solve it mathematically, ultimately, as you discover more and more and more of these things, the only way is to push everything out mathematically to infinity. So they're asking a different question. They're saying, why can't me and Red's rhetoric equate our local calculations exactly the same? Yeah, then the only way you can do that is put it on a ball and push everything out to infinity. Now, if you fundamentally, you're pushing everything out to infinity. So that's the way they resolve it. But they use that to say, well, look, it doesn't work on a flat plane. Exactly, yeah. But the reason it doesn't work on a flat plane is because you're asking a different question.
Okay. I mean, just for for clarity's sake, like I said, and forgive my ignorance on this, and I'm pretty sure you guys have mentioned it numerous times. So the reason why I mention this is because I always have these discussions with some of my relatives who are ball earthers. So when I explain to them about the sun not being 93 million miles away, that it's observably, closer and much smaller than that, then they'll come back at you with, okay, well, explain this and explain that, explain, time zones and all of that. But I try. The thing is, the reason why I gave them those measurements in particular is because this is what I read from that book, and I just wanted clarity on it. If what I said was correct, or was it just like, I guess, incorrect information? It was just, I guess, digging myself into a deeper hole by mentioning even a unit or a number attached to it. So, I mean, was it correct for me to even mention this, or?
Right on all counts, yes, you were digging yourself into a bit of a hole for the reasons I gave, which is it's a step too far in my opinion. No, you were perfectly reasonable to give that as QE's explained. You can easily triangulate and get that distance. So no, it's not an unreasonable assumption. They also take those distances, insert R to their assumptions. So when they're asking you all of their questions back, well, how does that work on a flat plane? With a little bit of research, as you will find, it's not that stressful. You'll find that they all start flat anyway. So they're always going to be begging the question of a sphere to give you any of these explanations they're asking you about in the first instance. After a time, you'll just find, if you do continue to research it, all of those questions will be answered with the "you'll need R for that" reply. In other words, their question starts with their assumption of a sphere and then gets you to answer how it would work on a flat Earth in what's called a false dichotomy fallacy. You're fairly new, so, I don't want to overwhelm you. Like I say, most of the questions you're being asked are only being asked because the person asking them has started with the presupposition that they're on a ball, got an idea of how it works on a ball, and are now repositioning their presupposition to get you to justify how it works on a flat plane, while they retain their presupposition the entire time you defend something that is obvious and observable as the nature of your reality to begin with, and theirs too. There we go. I wish you the best of possible luck in terms of your journeys with ballers that are relatives. I would suggest you don't bring it up ever again, ever. That's just my advice.
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, the thing is that, you know, I wanted like more evidence behind that, because I didn't want to just fall into the same trap they do. Okay, they say it's 93 million miles away. Okay, where's your proof for that? And then they bring up these mathematical equations, things that are theoretical and abstract. So I felt like I was kind of running into that same hole there by ascribing to it a number. I was trying to focus more so on, you know, the sun not being 93 million miles away, that it's observably, it's much closer and smaller than what we're told, and that in reality, the sun is what revolves around us, not us revolving around it. You know,
Well, hit him with the treg.
There were some other. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Hit him with the treg.
Hold on a second. I'm on this show called Flat Earth Debate Daily, and it's a housekeeping question. And everybody says we don't know the distance to the sun. So you just got me all confused today.
No, Neil, I was just about to say that, so you're not wrong to say that at all. The truth is that, reading between the lines here, so you feel free to stop me if I'm wrong in my assessment here, but when you come across this information, suddenly you feel like a bit of an outcast, a bit alone, and you want the people around you to appreciate, even if it's for excitement reasons, what you appreciate. Therefore, you'll tell them, because you want to involve them, they're your loved ones, etc., etc. That all makes perfect sense. However, there's a lot of things that, as a result of finding this information out, you'll find that you're actually shedding information far, far more than you're acquiring it. And this is a perfect example of that. So the honest answer is I don't know. You know, when they say, what's the distance to the sun? I don't know the answer to that question. Now, with a lot of things that you thought you knew the answers to, you don't now. That doesn't mean you have to come up with an explanation simply because you've realized that what you were told isn't necessarily true anymore. And if you can find it within yourself to take that standpoint, you'll get a lot less grief, which is to say, well, I don't actually know the answer to your question. I'm not suddenly a guru in this subject, but what I have found out is that, for example, and then rattle off an interesting tidbit that leaves them with something to think about. The 10th man approach, basically, which is to say, I don't know what the sun's distance is, but they claim it's a burning ball of gas in a vacuum. And that's a violation of natural law. You know, the sky can't be a vacuum. We'd all be dead because gas presses. It's got pressure. So it would just expand out into that space. So we definitely haven't got space. And then if they say, well, how does this map work with blah, blah, blah? Again, if you don't know the answer, then there's no reason why you should. You're not a cartographer. So you don't know.
Yeah, actually, that was. I'm sorry about that. You were going to say something.
Well, this is kind of a theological viewpoint here, you see, and a validation in that, does the distance matter? QE's put up the exact science, a little thing there. If you think about the Antikytherian devices, the way ancients always viewed it, stars weren't there for that purpose. They led a lot of other things. What the stars tend to be used for here is to validate a model, a heliocentric model, and as QE's little logo thing showed, look, the distances as it's grown, 100-mile differences over the years, and the reason for that changes is the numbers have to change so that the model still exists. So things have to grow, and that's why the numbers are important to them. I say I don't think we have a way, from a flat Earth perspective, of being able to validate it, and why, if you have that kind of perspective that we're not a ball spinning in something, why it's even that relevant what it is. And I think more fundamentally what we started at is we know it's an apparent position. So if we accept that, then all of it's nonsense and trying to place it. But I say, for me, distance is only there to support the heliocentric model, to validate it. I can tell you exactly how far it is, therefore it proves the model's correct. Well, as the list shows, that number's changed massively by orders of magnitude, a phrase I like.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One thing I wanted to ask, and I know I'm kind of going all over the place. I'm just trying to process some of the things that you guys just mentioned, which it just rolls off the tongue for you guys. For me, I just gotta kind of process it in for a minute because I'm like I said, I'm new to it. So I remember listening to one of your interviews, Nathan. I forgot who these two individuals were, but they were from the UK as well. And I think you mentioned something about about the azimuthal equidistant map, the flat Earth map. Would it be correct to even use that as because the way I look at it is that okay, these are coming from the same people that were pretty much refuting against NASA and these individuals. So if we fall into using their maps and then just put that into a flat Earth map, I feel like again you're falling into another hole. But I mean, some people are saying that the AE map is the flat Earth map. So I'm kind of stuck on that. Should we use that? Should we even use that map at all? In terms of our demonstrations, when we're demonstrating certain locations on Earth, or do we just say that we don't know?
There are no publicly available accurate world maps. That's the first thing. They're all distorted in one way or another. And if you know how to use a particular projection, let's just clear that up first and foremost. The azimuthal equidistant globe projection, is that a flat Earth map? Who's in the title? Definitely not. Globe projection.
Okay. That makes sense. Because I remember, like I said, and again, this is from, like I said, from the book that I was reading, the 200 Proofs. In there, it mentioned that the AE map was the flat Earth map. So I just wanted to get clarity on that because because you're not the only one. I've heard other people, other flat earthers say the same thing. So I think it's kind of best. I mean, for me personally.
Sure. It filtered its way in because it's part of the controlled op narrative. I'll give you the abbreviated version of this. As our opponents find it far easier to argue against us if we have a model. So if we have a model, they can hold up their model versus our model in full dichotomy. Now, the reliance is that somebody, first and foremost, doesn't appreciate that the azimuthal equidistant map or Gleason's map are actually global projections. The title, if you look up what azimuthal equidistant means, that essentially just means that the map will work correctly in terms of the distance values from the centre out. And it does. So, using it as a tool, perfectly acceptable. It works. But it's a flat map, like all of them, with no curve registered on it and distortions. Well, unless somebody can actually present me with a map, and that was the first part of my journey with Martin Liedtke, was looking at maps. He had a lot of knowledge on maps. And you look at all of them and they're all wrong and there's thousands of them. Well, why? Well, because we're in a world where we've been deceived about the nature of the ground beneath our feet. That's the first thing they'd mess with, and they'd just produce lots. It's like disinformation. There might be a real one. A slight variation of the AE map might be what the flat terrain looks like. I mean, it works reasonably well in many aspects. So you go, okay, well, that might be reasonably close. I don't know. But that's how you work disinformation. Drop something that's the truth in amongst a lot of nonsense. And so long as the maps, in terms of the way they're projected, work, nobody cares. The fact that we've got lots of them, well, yeah, we've got lots of them. So nobody really gives it much consideration. Up until the subject dropped on my lap, I didn't give it any consideration. The only consideration I gave it was something I drew allegiance with Mark Sargent with, which is after I got the first iPhone. I thought, that would be cool to have on my computer. I'd like to have my new computer that I got at the time, many years ago, probably 2, 3 or 4 or something like that. I thought it'd be nice to have the weather on a screensaver, a world view from a satellite with all the weather on Earth. That'd be cool. And I looked, and all I found was picture after picture after picture of the blue marble. I scratched my head, and I'm like, that's not exactly what I was hoping to find. I was hoping to find real-time weather. Well, that would be something dead easy to find. Not at all. But you don't give it any consideration. And then later interviewing Mark Sargent, he's like, yeah, I searched my way through pictures to do I think said he was doing it for a network or something like that. But he had the same exact experience as me. It's like, where the hell are all the pictures? You just find one. But you just don't give it much consideration. And it's the same with maps. You're not going to give them much consideration. The fact that there's loads and loads and loads of different projections. But, maybe someone out there is going to take a load of, what are they called? The Ordnance Survey maps and just sellotape them all together. You never know. Has anybody thought about actually doing that? Why not?
Yeah, that's because I was thinking about it because I was looking at the AE map and so one of the explanations I heard is of the Antarctic ice wall, and that's what's keeping all the oceans together. I mean, is that something that we know for sure that it's an ice wall? I mean, I know we don't know what's beyond Antarctica because of the international treaties and whatnot, but would it be correct for someone to say that, okay, based on the AE map, there's a 360-degree ice wall that's surrounding Earth, and that's one of the reasons what's keeping the oceans together? And again, I know this is kind of going into speculation, but would that be correct to say that to someone due to the explanation that if you were to keep your back from Polaris and just travel south, you'll get to the ice wall? So, I mean, I don't even know if even calling it an ice wall is correct. I mean, could you kind of, explain that to me? I know, like, again, I apologize for going all over the place. It's just just trying to process some of the things that I learned today.
All good. It warms my heart. You've disclaimed you're new here, so you'll get a fair amount of slack. Let's just say. Likewise with the sun, you don't know what you don't know, right? Well, you, by the same nature as everybody else who gets here, has been led along a certain path that's been forged by our opponents. So they know that people are going to roll down the hill, as I use in metaphor, between being a normie globe believer that's not really giving it any thought, and then finding out the Earth is obviously and observably flat. Unfortunately, that path, that rolling down the hill, has got a gully way that's been forged out by our opponents. And along the way, you pick up all this crap dirt on your shoulders as you're rolling down, metaphorically. That dirt is things like an ice wall. Now, in some ways, it could be argued in happy discussion that there's a logical extrapolation to be made in terms of an ice wall. But that isn't what you're doing. You've come to that conclusion for the same reason everyone else comes to it, which is that you've been given that piece of information in maps and various other descriptions of how the Earth could be if you were to take a look at this map of it or that model of it or this representation of it. Now, I don't know how far the sun is, regardless of it being far easier to claim I do, because you could get a measurement with a triangle, QE, is to get its height. But when it comes to an ice wall, well, okay, yes, you've made that logical extrapolation. If we give you the benefit of the doubt, that's what it was, even though I know it wasn't. Why would you make that logical extrapolation, and how would you confirm it if you were to go forth to your loved ones and say there's an ice wall? What would you say would be the standard that should be achieved in terms of making that assertion? Would be the question I'd ask you.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. So the assertion of me referring to it as an ice wall was what you were asking?
Yeah. So if I'm going to assert that, the way that a unicorn digests food is as follows, and you turn around to me and say, well, what standard would you present to say that there was even unicorns in the first place? I'm saying, okay, you say that by logical extrapolation, we've got water and it must be contained somehow, therefore there's an ice wall. I go, okay, well, what have you done to actually validate that in any way?
I see your point there. I see your point. It's for me. It would be. I kind of see now. I see where you're going here, because then I'm going to fall into the same, the same thing as globe earthers do when you ask them about, what's the proof that the Earth is round. And one of the first things they say is pictures.
And the first thing you'll find is a guru that's presenting a model that wants you to follow them.
Right.
So there's two different paths. After you've rolled down through the gully that's been forged by our opponents, you do eventually get to a clearing. You've got to dust yourself off and make a decision. Do I quickly look around this open area and go, where the hell is the next guru? Give me answers. Or do you go, shit, where am I? What is this place? What's that? And when you take that mindset, you suddenly feel like a 3-year-old kid again. I've got very young children at home at the moment, and it's an enlightening experience. You can sort of reflect on your own growing up and think, God, what a wasted opportunity. Just a world of wonder. I even asked my kid today, how are you finding life? I meant it in the most sincere way. I'm like, you've only had a year of experiencing what life really is in a cognitive way that you can describe to me. Tell me, how do you find it? Because I want to know. Because I've got that childlike wonder. I've dusted myself off at the bottom of the gully, got rid of a lot of the crap like ice walls and domes, gone, wow, this place is absolutely amazing. I wonder what that bright light in the sky is. What I don't do is turn around to next man and go, what's that and how can I worship it? That's
Hold on, you can't put ice walls with domes, Nathan, because we do have gas pressure. Come on.
It depends on how you feel when you get to the opening, Completely ignore Neil's comment.
I know you are. We have a dome.
You must be contained.
My proof of dome is we have gas pressure.
Okay.
Well,
Someone claiming.
looking at like
Is somebody making a
around-
claim about the shape of containment here?
How about
Yeah.
a link?
Yeah. I'm just going to let him off the hook and just take it a different direction, though, Adam. So, as far as the other end of the extreme in flat Earth is infinite plane, well, no, I'm afraid not. This mathematical concept's not going to apply to my reality in that respect, so you can just rule that out. But if you discount that, we don't know the extent of the expanse. Now, we've straight away gone to a presupposition of a ring around, what do you know? The current area that's excluding all of the land as a possibility because it's on a spherical surface. That just happens to be surrounded, does it? Why? How do I know that in 1,000,000 miles, 2 million, 20 million, whatever number you want to ascribe, just not infinite? Yeah? At that extent, there's something else that acts as a barrier. Could be rock. I don't bloody know. But my point is that if you want to presuppose that there must be some sort of barrier at the end of it all, well, fine. But you don't know where and how far. Now, the current paradigm has a finite amount of land in a certain amount of area. Right? And on a sphere, that's very much finite. Well, what do you know? Lined up, just ready for us to all buy in and argue about, is a contained area with an ice wall around it. Oh, that sounds convenient. You scratch your chin and go, what about if that concept we've all been led to believe around this finite amount of land that we just happen to coincidentally also have on a ball, meaning there wouldn't be any more of it, with its value constantly rising in the fiat currency we've all ascribed to? Yeah, what about if beyond where you say there's an ice wall on this convenient map that's a globe projection, what if there was vast amounts of ocean beyond that? Maybe even another sun. Who knows? Certainly not us, because apparently, well, if we went that far enough, not that we're looking, there's apparently an ice wall stopping us. Is there? Who's checked? The world of possibility that lies before my feet. You're all like, excuse me, have we got this paradigm-changing ice wall around us? Oh, yeah, look on this map. No, let's just go and have a look, if you're so inclined. Rather than asking next man, get on a boat and go that direction. Head reckon away from the North Pole if that's what you want to do. And then maybe you'll find that there's another continent. Doesn't seem so long ago, even in the current rhetoric, that that's what they exactly describe as happening, right? It's even tied to the heliocentric bullshit story. So, it's not that far-fetched. But, I don't know, if you limit your mind with the models that they present on the way when you're falling down the controlled-op gully that's been carved for you, unfortunately, you're lining yourself up for what I think will probably be the case anyway, which there'll be a new model that's the world's model, and it'll be punted out to everybody, and they'll all just accept it, and it won't actually serve any benefit in terms of a realization of potentially your discovery of the world, rather than your being given a piece of information about the world based on a model that some other gurus decided is correct.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I feel, because honestly, when I was looking into that, and when I was looking into the map and then the ice wall, but the excuse they give for the ice wall is that because obviously there's a military treaty, and if one wants to independently explore Antarctica, then they'll either be turned away or shot on sight. But again, I mean, even saying that there's an ice wall and it's containing the oceans, I do agree that it's just speculation at that point. It's not something that's concrete and for sure that we know. But I was gonna ask, so I mean, what piece of information or article or books would you recommend for someone like me who's new to Flat Earth? I mean, because I tuned into some of your past shows, and it's all, to be honest with you, it's something that I'm not used to hearing. For example, the R value, geometric curve. Even though I might know about these things in a basic sense, but not as advanced as you guys are on. And I mean, so what would you recommend?
Join the show every day.
No, there's a top 3 for that. If somebody that doesn't want to stick around to basically really get a handle on what's being talked about when we ask about the geometric R value and laugh about people when they haven't got it, etc., the top 3 is what we used to do. Maybe that's something we should do coming up in the future, Kiwi. We should cover the top 3 globe destroyers or flat Earth proofs again. Because, yeah, there are shortcuts. Black Swan, while it is something that you'll have heard discussed or mentioned, a good understanding of the Black Swan would be the number 1 thing I would recommend to anybody who comes to this discussion. No, it's not like as simple as 2 + 2. It does take a little bit of understanding. But once you've got your head around that, you can overcome most arguments. And second to that, used to be what I'd recommend as the first thing, is I've mentioned already, is the fact that you can't have a sky vacuum. That, for me, is something that is very quick and easy to also, if you have to, mention to other people if you end up in the conversation. Their entire model, their entire worldview is set in a sky vacuum. So, pointing out that you can't have gas pressure without a container is a paradigm shift for anybody who hears it if they've got half a brain. So those couple of things are usually enough. Slightly advanced, but still on the top 3 would be the Coriolis deviation. The claim that things will drift because we're turning beneath them. We don't see that happen. That's fairly straightforward as well. So that is and was the top 3, but Coriolis effect, I don't know, man. Sextant's just so much better. The top 3, if I might find there's been a change in terms of my disc jockey presentation of it if we do it in the near future. There you go. There's my top 3 for you.
Okay, that actually that makes more sense to focus on these than trying to get into explaining how everything works on Flat Earth, like time zones, seasons. So I mean, based on your personal recommendation, should I even still like benefit or read from the book that I mentioned, the 200 Proofs, or should I just go for something else instead? Because I feel like if I was to recommend, I'm sorry,
I would personally, and hand on heart, I'd recommend me.
I think Kiwi's got a library.
Look, there are other gurus available. Other gurus are available. So look, there's nothing wrong with debates. Same goes for if you're a Mark Sargent fan or an Arwen fan or any other guru. You know, they're all great.
Nate, I'd
But Mitchell's the
What?
best.
talking to this guy, right? I'd say read it. 200 Proofs, it has a lot of stuff in there. And some of it doesn't support a flat earth. Some of it's nonsensical, some of them, yeah? Some of them are incorrect. So the best thing you can do is read it yourself and come to your own conclusion. There isn't some flat
fair
earth
enough.
Bible to guide. I'm not being patronizing here, but the best way is to actually be able to critically appraise, like with what's been presented tonight with the method. If you've got an argument from the ballers, stick the scientific method to it, and use your understanding of the scientific method, not go and have an argument, a way of dealing with every argument. Yeah, that's the way forward. There isn't a handbook. It's equip yourself with the tools that are out there, and then use your own critical thinking to destroy the ballers.
All right, guys, we're going to have to wrap
You're
this
as
up.
good as the
Hold
rest
on.
of us. So don't think otherwise.
All right, thanks, Adam. Listen, guys, we're going to have to wrap this up because it's getting really, in fact, it's going to be past dinner, and it's already past dinner. Mitchell, I put you on mute because you forgot to put yourself on mute. We're listening to your family having fun. But let's go ahead and wrap it up, Nathan.
Indeed you do.
Maybe some last words for this guy right here, maybe to point him in the right direction, maybe to come on the show. Come on your show during the week. Right.
That's what I said.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
he's checked out a few of the shows, and I would continue to do that. But I think Adam's advice was the most pertinent, just to say, particularly assess the stuff you come across. QE said it on the show during the presentation. After we assessed and critiqued some of the citations, chew the meat, spit out the bones. It's you doing the chewing at the end of the day. So, you know, there's a lot of great stuff from Eric DeBay. And some of the stuff, I would scream and tear my hair out while I'm listening and watching it. It's the same with anybody. Feynman, we all love the guy. Some of the stuff he says is just so stupid, it's untrue. Everybody does that. Nobody's perfect. And Eric DeBay is no different. You know, but if you must follow a guru, I personally would recommend Arwen.
Huh.
Hi, channel. Arwen, go ahead, do your plugs.
Right. Wow. Okay, I'm a guru apparently. I do my best. I'm more like an oracle. But anyway, yeah, I do a Flat Earth early bird show every day, 2 p.m., 1 p.m. Amsterdam time. In the weekdays, 2 p.m. in the weekends. So that's kind of early for the United States, and for the Europe, it's okay. And yeah, I interact a lot with my chat. I'm up for any questions you can think of, pretty much, as long as they're not really nasty or anything, or don't give people nightmares, or at least not straight away. And yeah, hope to see you in chat. Thanks
That's
for
a
the time.
terrible plug. That's Flat Earth Early Bird, 2 p.m. Amsterdam, 1 p.m. UK time, on the Arwin channel, ARWIJN. Mitchell
that's
from Australia, you've
in the
been served muted, but hopefully QE will hustle you off mute so you can do a plug for your own show.
Apology, guys. Yeah, after the first hour of the show, it's usually a bit of audio chaos here. That's why the lack of input after the first hour, but I am listening. Yeah, please subscribe to Mitchell from Australia. I do a Monday to Friday show, 2 p.m. Central. What's that? 8 p.m. UK. I think it is 6 a.m. Australian. Going out there, just looking at our beautiful flat Earth school around us, just doing demonstrations, debunking the globe, proving flat Earth. Please subscribe. Really appreciate it.
Actually, as much as I say follow Arwen for a guru, Mitchell is like a... I heard somebody describing a show earlier, saying or discussing the whys and wherefores of whether or not it was kid friendly. I can't remember whose show I was watching, but
That was mine.
was it yours? Yeah, it's like it's a diluted version. I don't want to say that in any sort of derogatory way. A more concise version of what we discuss on Flat Earth Debate. So I'd check out the Flat Earth School. That is precisely what you get from Mitch. You know, a concise summary of the points we argue about and how relevant sense to a glober as a debunking or a flat earther as a proof. Check out the Flat Earth School. That would be my advice.
Right, it's very kid friendly.
For a guru, I'd also recommend downloading the Flat Earth Sun Moon Zodiac Clock app, just in the interest of balance. It does have an AE map on it, but it also has a lot of features with a lot of good basic videos, advanced videos. It's a wealth of knowledge on that app. It is David Wise's app, one of the a loud guru in the flat Earth, if you will. So that's what I would recommend.
I've done that. I've got to throw in a disclaimer while QE's in a hurry. So the azimuthal equidistant projection is a tool, and as a tool, it can serve many different purposes. And one of the purposes can be and is the utilization to help somebody who's currently stuck in a pre-programmed paradigm of sphere beneath their feet. Now, it is a useful tool to snap people out of that, because without it, it's difficult to get somebody to conceptualize a flat Earth when they've had an appreciation of a ball from birth. So utilization of that description with a moon and a sun moving over the top of an azimuthal equidistant projection is the best you've got in terms of a tool to help somebody conceptualize how it could be perceived. Does that mean that it is the terrain? No, that's a reification fallacy. Now, I've highlighted this with Dearth, and I'm blue in the face, and with Mark Sargent, and both were very amiable and appreciative of those facts. They both say the same thing. It's just a tool. You know, I need it to show how it's going to be presented if somebody doesn't have any appreciation of it. Now, so long as you understand it as a tool and don't reify it into your world, then it's perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with the azimuthal equidistant projection when used as a tool by flat earthers. That's fine. Is it an accurate world map? No, definitely not. Is it useful when you're tracking the sun? Absolutely.
Can I make a distinction there? Just on that.
I'm gonna bubble your eye.
Really correct, Nathan. So you might. No, the azimuthal equidistance is a planar projection of the globe Earth. If we're going to talk about something being accurate, that isn't. Talking about sun positions, then the Gleason's is accurate, and it lends to what I talked about earlier. That to me is the one that is accurate in terms of observationally telling you where the sun will be based on where you are locally. Not what the Gleason's doesn't tell you is what the topography or the shape of the continents or the land around you. It's a bit like a clock. It kind of allows you to dial up where you are and read the sun. That's very different, its layout, to a kind of azimuthal projection. The standard one you see, the UN symbol, etc., which is, like I say, just a flat projection of the globe. So they've taken the stuff, stuck it on a globe, and then transposed it onto flat, and there is a difference.
I thought the Gleason's was exactly the same in terms of how it looks.
Maybe similarly, I don't think it transposes exactly with regards to time and stuff. It looks very close, but the way they're derived fundamentally is different. Gleason's is plotted based on sun on a polar graph, sun positions on a polar graph, and time, and whereas the other one is a flat projection taken from sphere projection first.
Even if I try and be Weasley, because I didn't say a North Pole centric azimuthal as equidistant projection, which would basically look the same as a Gleason's. But you are correct, and I will concede that I was wrong because it is the Gleasons that you'd use to track the sun, not the azimuth equidistant projection, even if it was North Pole centric. So I concede I was wrong.
It is a sort of nuance, and it's only that sort of nuance. There is still a difference between a North Pole azimuthal of the globe and the Gleason's projection, which is based on its positions based on the sun. It tells you where the sun is. It's not really the centre's defined by the sun in a Gleason's. It's kind of a presumed point. So its plottings on dial on that map are derived from sun.
Right.
More fundamental, whereas the plottings on the azimuthal are derived just directly from your standard globe. That's why they're put there. There's a lot more validity to it than an AZ.
Indeed, and you can do an AZ from any point. I think there's a picture of, I think it's JFK on Air Force One, and in one of the photographs he's got an azimuthal equidistant projection on the wall behind him on the plane, but it's centered on Texas or something like that. In other words, you can do it from wherever you like, but the Gleason's is very specific in terms of what it's used for as a tool. And you're right, it's based around the sun's movement. So, yeah, there's a very distinct difference between an AE map and a Gleason's, especially as you can literally project an AE map from anywhere you like.
The world looks a mess, doesn't it, when they do the same thing from the supposed south pole.
And with that,
it doesn't comport to reality. It's interesting that the only way they get it to comport to reality is from that center point. They've kind of built their ball, has to be built around that. Yeah, it doesn't match anywhere else. If you move it, whereas a Gleason's, like I say, stays the same.
You got a super chat for staying live. You see, check that out.
4 more hours. See, I'm scoring super chats for you.
I've got a show running. It's only because it's a great conversation, and the guy's name's obscured by my mute button now. This guy right there, he had some great questions that have sort of spurred into this, because he's got a newbie insight to it, and nice because you overlook some of these things like mapping. I don't know. It's a good conversation.
It is.
I will drop in that I've got a show running. I'll drop a link in the chat. Was there anybody else on the panel that wanted to add something? Neil, Adam, you haven't plugged your show or anything?
It is a good conversation. I just wanted to add this. That's why I left it go for an extra hour and 11 minutes. So back to the super chat. She said, remove Arwin's mod. They're abusing it. What?
I don't know. Don't get into the wrangle dangle. Thank you for the super chat.
Thank you.
Obviously, Sarah Hayes. Really appreciate the support.
Yeah, let's round her on out.
Kiwi's.
Did you want to... Oh, hold on. Neil, go ahead.
I just said Kiwi's hungry. End the damn show already.
And did you want to plug your show so we round out properly without being hurried?
Yeah.
Hurried!
These buggers are right on my case every time they're on the show. 4 more hours. Oh, I'll just ask this question of a fundy right on the 2-hour mark just to keep you going.
I told him the secret. I have to admit, when you left,
Neil got kudos for that on this week. We all in the
You like that one?
Google group. Yeah, gave him extra kudos the way literally you were trying to go and then he smashed one in. And was it a Kumu that just kept going? So yeah,
that's one of the things. Yeah, I'll speak to those guys after that. I gave them a couple little insights into prolonging the show. I'm guilty.
Right, yeah, I sense that. I didn't know you had an instigating factor in it, but there we go. Now I do.
A little bit. Not every time, but a little bit.
The things we plan when you drop, Nathan.
Yeah, the things we plan when you drop us.
I'll try once more. For the sake of QE and his dinner. Adam, did you want to plug your channel? Because you have actually got one to plug now.
Well, I have, but what I'm going to do is defend one and just address the super chat. respectfully, Arwen's there. He's a mod, and if you're going to come in and just attack him and his show and strawman him for some kind of man love with Owen Benjamin, then he's got the right to moderate you. Use the chat for what it's there for, which is to engage with us in the debate and not just cheaply attack one of the mods. And if you do, you'll get exactly what happened, and you might have the right rebuttal in the super chat, and I'm sure Q will be more than happy for you to keep arguing with super chats, but well, keep it respectful and it won't happen again. I just reviewed it, so yeah. A shout out Arwen. But Arwen on his own channel, he'll smash the crap out of you and mute you for all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
Even, you know, so it's different rules over there.
It was only a timeout. Just like, oh, you come here and complaining about, you get timed out for that. Like, oh, so it's the first thing you say is complaining about.
Alrighty then.
What's gonna happen?
Okay.
I've got one.
You
point
better
with
make it.
regard to
I'm
Arwen.
serious. I'm going to mute you guys.
It is relevant to tonight because we were talking about the ice wall, and I was in Arwen's chat the other day, and it came up, and I just said, "Oh yeah, I've heard they've opened a Starbucks and a Domino's Pizza on the other side of the ice wall now," and I was then attacked by a flat earther and said why, and I said because it's a silly question. It's all, and you can't do that in chat. But tonight's show, hopefully, whoever, I can't remember the person's name, who was exceptionally rude, called me all sorts of very, very naughty things, some of which I am guilty of. But
I concur with some of them. I concur with some of them at this point.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I'm not denying it. The point being is, as there's flat earthers out there, that's why I said that to whoever it was when I addressed it like that and called it silly, because it's presupposition, yeah, and it doesn't help our cause. It's lovely to dream, and if you sat around with your friends, you could pontificate on these things. But you should also just, as we were talking to this guy, just expand your knowledge and apply your own critical thinking. And unless you know there's an ice wall, why are you moving forward with the concept of an ice wall?
Adam, I'm going to wring your damn neck. Nathan, round us out.
Winter's coming.
I love it. I'll remember that sentiment next time. Okay. Right, I've spammed the chat, so if you want to move on to the next chat, go to Flat Earth Debate on Nathan Oakley channel, because it is actually premiering now. It's been premiering for about 3/4 of an hour, but the conversation has been good. So, you know, that's why it's rattled on longer than it normally has. But with that, I will first and foremost say a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of you who tuned in live, smashed the super chat, liked, commented, shared, subscribed, and all that good stuff. Of course, a massive thank you to Arwen, Neil, Quantum Eraser himself for hosting, Adam Meakin, and all of the people who joined from the public chat in Discord. I've been Nathan Oakley. Once again, tune in to Flat Earth Debate over on the Nathan Oakley channel. I'll spam the chat before the intro rolls. And I'll see you all. We will see you all in the next Ballbusters.